Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Town of Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting for December 6, 2022. First order is to introduce the planning board members. So I'll start over at my extreme left, Doug Breskin. Then sitting next to Doug is Von Dugan. Mike Hodder is the vice chairman of the planning board. To my right is John Thurston, and then Brad Harriman, who's the representative to the planning board from the Board of Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs, who is an alternate. But Julie, Peter Goodwin is not going to be here. Could you sit on his behalf?
Yes, I will.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we have 7 members. Okay, the first item on the agenda, public hearings, and we have 9 items to go through. All of these amendments the planning board has been looking at them all year. We've considered the master plan. Most of the regulations have been reviewed by our attorney. Also, there's been a lot of discussion by all of the planning board members. The way that we're going to run this tonight, the public hearing is required for any change to the zoning ordinance prior to the amendment being placed on the town ballot for the deliberative session in March of 2023. This year, the planning board has focused on reviewing ordinances for housing, due to a need for more of a diversity of housing in Wolfeboro. The public hearing is held so members of the public can have clarity on the changes and make suggestions to the planning board. I'm going to read each item into the record one at a time, give a brief explanation, and turn it over to Tavis for a more detailed explanation of the amendment. Then I'll open the public hearing so members of the public can give us your thoughts. I'll then close the public hearing, and the planning board will make a determination as to how to proceed. If there are no changes to the amendment, we'll entertain a motion to move this to the 2023 town warrant for a vote. If there are changes, the item will be held over for a future date for action by the planning board. Okay, the way this is listed on the public hearing is that it's listed according to the way it was in the paper. So that's how we're going to proceed. And as I go along here, I'll try to remember to tell you where to look in the voter's guide, okay? So everybody gets on the same page. Okay, the first item, 175 definitions. That's adding accessory dwelling units, adding affordable housing, amending boathouse, adding conditional or special use permit, and adding short-term rental and adding the yield plan. This is found on page 7 and 8. So I'll turn this over to Tavis for his comments on the definitions.
Do you want to do them individually as they show up in the voter's guide?
Yes.
Okay. So accessory dwelling unit is already defined in the ordinance. It's currently located in the accessory dwelling unit section of the ordinance, which is 175-57.1. This is simply moving, the planning board's goal for the past year plus has been to move all the definitions from the respective areas of the zoning into the definition section. So anywhere it says adding accessory dwelling unit to definitions, that means it's simply moving from where it currently is in the ordinance to the definitions. The same is true for affordable housing. With the definition of boathouse, the planning board has recommended the definition of boathouse be amended. This is on page 7. The definition of boathouse is proposed to change to as defined and permitted by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, NHDES, under New Hampshire RSA 42:1 and NHDES administrative rules. Adding the definition of conditional or special use permit, that is simply adding those terms to the definitions. Those are generally referred to in the regulations but not defined. On page 8, you have conditional or special use permit, the tool used by municipalities to implement, quote, innovative land use controls, end quote, adopted pursuant to RSA 674:21. With regard to adding short-term rental, that's also on page 8. Short-term rental, the proposal is to add a definition of short-term rental as follows. The use of a residential housing unit for inhabitation or rental for periods of less than 1 month or 31 days, whichever is less. And then yield plan is currently elsewhere in the ordinance, being proposed to move it over into the definitions as currently written. The process of establishing the number of units that could be established under the existing development regulations of the town of Wolfeboro.
Okay, okay, and that yield plan is definitely, is basically used for the inclusionary zoning ordinance, is that right?
Correct.
That's where it's listed, okay.
The definition of affordable housing and yield plan are part of the proposed article, yes, for inclusionary.
Okay, all right, then I'll open the public hearing on the first item, number A, definitions. Okay, go ahead, Roger. Yeah.
There should be a button turning it on, Roger.
We'll find out in just a second.
Okay, can you hear me now? Was that a yes or
Yes,
some mumbling
yes,
behind me?
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to address the definition of a boathouse. I think it first appeared in the zoning ordinance back maybe in the 70s when a boathouse appeared on a small island in Lake Winnipesaukee with wall-to-wall carpeting, a refrigerator, and other amenities. And the benefit of having a boathouse out there was that the island was very small, and there's no way that a building would meet the setbacks if it wasn't a boathouse. And that put a definition in the zoning ordinance. I would like to suggest that we keep the current definition because that places, it's a more stringent definition than the state definition, and it states that solely for boats, storage, and slips, and that it has a pitched roof, which means you're not going to get a sun deck on top. I think it's a better definition. I think we should retain it. I also think that if you're going to put a definition in the ordinance, you should spell it out. The wording should be in there. You shouldn't send someone off on a field trip to go find it in another document. The other benefit of that is that it means you're going to get your references correct. RSA 42:1 is oath of town officers. It has absolutely nothing to do with boathouses. So I would like to suggest that rather than insert the boathouse definition from environmental regulations 102.29, you keep what is in there.
Okay, are you going to continue?
I have one other, and that's the yield plan. And as you pointed out, that involves the inclusionary zoning proposal. And I think it's very important because that provides the basis for determining what density is allowed. The current definition reads the process of establishing the number of market rate units that could be established under the existing development regulations of the town. The difference here is that market rate is taken out. You have market rate in there, it's pretty straightforward. You look at the number of units that could go in there if it were just going to be sold on the open market, and then you do your computation. This basically seems to say that however you can figure out how many units you can get in there, whether it's by variance or some other method, that counts. And I think you should keep the present definition, and I'm not sure what the purpose was of taking out market rate.
Okay, all right, thank you. Tavis, do you want to comment on that? On the boathouse and then the yield plan?
Well, my original recommendation on boathouse was to refer to, I think staff's original recommendation on boathouse was to refer to the NHDES definition of a boathouse. That was then amended by the board to include apparently a bad reference to 42:1 in the administrative rules. So,
May I ask, is Roger correct? And 42:1 has nothing to do with boathouse regulations. It has everything to do with oaths of office of officers?
I'm not as well versed in statutory
I checked that
references.
at least twice.
Well, I must apologize. I did not know that.
Would you like me to read the definition from the rules?
I'm sorry?
Would you like me to read the definition from
No,
the
I take your word for it. It's perfectly fine.
the
It's clear as
well,
something.
That's what I'd like to see put in there, so you don't have to go look them up in some other publication.
I think the reason the board moved in this direction was in case those rules change, we don't have to consistently or constantly modify the town regulations.
Well, the downside of that means that every time the legislature or administrative body meets, you can change your definitions.
But seeing as how boathouse permits are issued by the state, not the city, not the town, that we cannot issue a boathouse permit on our own steam. We have to defer to the state NHDES for a boathouse permit. And they define what a boathouse is and where one can be erected and its maximum size and so on. It seems to me that we're acting unnecessarily. The definitions are set by the state. If we simply refer to the state definitions, are we not covering ourselves for every eventuality? We won't have to continually rewrite our definition, and the state sets the rules for what a boathouse is or is not.
Well, we also set rules for boathouse, and you do get a permit from the town to build a boathouse, and the town can adopt regulations that are more stringent than the state, and what I'm suggesting is a regulation that is more stringent than the state.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to go ahead?
Suzanne Ryan, a question. The definitions typically will be put into a page of our booklet that has definitions,
Yeah,
as
yes.
well as they're included in your new proposed ordinance. I'm just trying to separate out that I found the yield, I found the short term, and I found the boathouse, but so you're incorporating the definition of those uses into the warrant article.
We have a separate section in the zoning ordinance for definitions, and all we're trying to do is get all the definitions into one section. That's really all this is all about.
Okay, so that doesn't preclude the discussion on, like, accessory dwelling. You're going to go through the whole criteria, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Ye- Yes, right. And just the definition of
Okay.
a certain.
And then I'd like to put up the zoning map on the easel, and I'd like to give out a couple of copies to the board
For the definitions?
for tonight's warrant articles. It would
Okay.
be nice for the public to be able to see what the
Okay.
zones are.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to add to this? Okay, then, no other comments, so I'll close the public hearing. Planning board members, how would you like to proceed?
Well, clearly, we have to check the reference and get the correct boathouse numbers down for the DES boathouse permitting.
Well, another thought, if the board is comfortable with the definition in the voter's guide, it could simply be as defined and permitted by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services under the administrative rules. It doesn't need the reference. Or it could say under NHRSA and administrative rules,
And just scratch the number.
and scratch the number.
That would probably be cleaner in the long run and last longer.
There won't be a concern if the number changes in RSAs.
Right, we have done this in other sections, used
Yeah.
the RSA, so I didn't think this was particularly unusual.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's just get rid of the embarrassment of NHRSA 42:1, leave and retain the rest of the proposed definition. I take Roger's point, but elsewhere in our in amendment number 8, when we were actually considering a boathouse, we do say specifically the project must comply with all applicable state and municipal regulations. And that does cover us for town of Wolfeboro regulations as well. So I think if we alter the RSA reference, you remove the RSA reference, I think the definition proposed can stand. Then we can discuss Article 8 boathouse regulation changes at that point.
At that time.
So-
Right.
Department of Environmental Services, parentheses, NHDES, parentheses, strike until and.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
And also move that as a motion.
I second
The
it.
removal or
Correct.
the whole thing? The removal?
The removal is.
Oh, okay,
yeah, yeah.
I'll second that. Oh, okay, all in favor of removing the thing that Tavis just mentioned, the wording, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so now we're back to the entire definition section of 175-175. Any other questions? The yield plan, I think we've clarified that. That's for the inclusionary zoning.
The yield plan is currently in the ordinance, in the existing inclusionary zoning. This would move the term yield plan just into definitions. Yes.
Yeah, and
And what about the market rate? The removal of the wording?
Professionally, I'm not worried about the word market rate being used because when you're calculating density, you're not calculating based on market rate or affordable.
Yeah.
You're looking at a base number of units based on the existing development parameters.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Vaughn.
yeah, actually, I was going to say it has nothing to do with the price point of the property or the units on it. It has to do with the yield, which is only based on, let's say, wetlands or lot size and all these other criteria. It has nothing to do with the cost or affordability. So I would scratch market rate too, because it's not part of the same conversation.
Okay, any other comments? I'd entertain a motion on the definition section 175-175.
Are we discussing Vaughn's consideration? Are we discussing Vaughn's consideration or the entire,
Well, I thought she was sort of supporting what we're,
are you supporting?
I'm supporting it as we
All
have
right.
stated.
yeah,
I'd be
right.
happy to move that the proposed changes to the definitions of accessory dwelling unit, I beg pardon, the changes to the definitions, adding the definition of accessory dwelling unit, affordable housing, amending the definition of boathouse, adding the definition of conditional or special use permit, and adding the definitions for short-term rental and yield plan be adopted by the board.
Okay, somebody want to second that?
Seconded.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, on to item B, 175-109 through 112. This is to delete the commercial district C2 in its entirety. Actually, we had a public hearing on all of the uses in the C2 district last year and moved them all to the Pine Hill Development District. Since the voters adopted that, we really have no need for the C2 district. This is a district in the downtown area that is an area that includes the Bean Park and the freight station. So that's why we're proposing moving it. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this item. It's on page 8, by the way.
Question, if the C2 district is dissolved, what does the land become on the zoning map in the town? Is it absorbed by something else?
It would become...
It's commercial 2 right now.
It's a valid question. The board may want to add to what is Article 7 currently, removal of the boundary, the legal description or the district boundary section of C2 from the beginning of the ordinance, and then further to amend the C1 district to include that parcel.
Can we do that without having to hold this over? Is that a clarification?
Well, what this is doing is removing the district regulations, so there are no more permitted uses or special exception uses.
In
Right.
C2.
In the C2. Which is
of-
still there, and it's still, I believe, a town-owned parcel, so the zoning is somewhat irrelevant. But if you wanted, you could add addendum motions to this. We'd have to schedule another public hearing to
Yeah.
do that, but to modify the C1 district and remove the district boundary.
Oh, okay, or we could do that next year, I guess.
Yeah.
Or whichever.
What surrounds the current C2?
Yeah.
C1.
As,
Then would not C2 automatically become C1 if C2 disappears?
Well, you have to remember, the town doesn't have an official zoning map, so it doesn't happen that way, because there's still a district boundary in the beginning.
But there's no longer a district boundary if we disappear
okay,
C2,
good.
correct?
Yeah,
we have a large tract of land that there was a dispute over this spring, I believe. What is going to happen to it if we in town vote C2 out? That land has to become some zoning.
yeah, right.
Shouldn't that be part of the proposal so we know we're not just killing something off, we're voting for the future, what's going to replace it? I mean...
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Thank you.
I'm used to, I've been a voter in New Hampshire for 52 years. I'm used to seeing from to on zoning things. I've been on the zoning board in another town it was about 30 years, okay? I really think we need more clarity than what I've seen on paper tonight. We're going from something to something. I think that's what we should see. By the way, my name is Walter Collins, Berrywood Drive.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. Okay, well, we could add that and postpone this until
Absolutely.
January 2nd. That seems to be the safest thing to do. Okay, would somebody like to make anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Suzanne, sorry.
I beg to differ with the town planner. We don't have an official zoning map per the state statute, which would have the town lay out the existing and future roads. We do have an official zoning district map, which is the voted districts by the town, and I take issue with the fact of saying we don't have an official map. We have an official zoning district map, which is different from the official map that lays out future roads.
Okay, and we are dealing with the issue by amending this and postponing it. Okay, so So it will be consistent with that map. Right, okay, thank you. Okay, come on up, Ken.
Ken Perry from North Wolfeboro. According to my memory, there's places in the ordinance where it says refer to the official town zoning map at Town Hall. So don't we have one?
We don't
Yeah.
have an official zoning map per the state's definition of one, no.
But
We have that, which is our own zoning map, and that's, I'm sure, what's referred to.
Is there one in the town hall that is the official zoning map for the town if someone has a question?
That's the map you refer to.
This is an illustration of the district boundaries that are described.
In the
In the
zoning
ordinance.
ordinances.
There is not an official zoning map.
So doesn't our ordinance refer to an official zoning map already in places? It seems to me I've seen that.
I can look.
We refer
really
to the
understand
zoning districts as shown on the map.
And that's the wording in the ordinance, the zoning district map.
Yeah, right. And that map, I think, is in the town hall.
Hope it's someplace.
We would hope it
Hope
was.
it's
Yeah,
someplace.
well,
we hope
I
so.
hope that it is too. And it's also on the town website.
Yes, that's the 2019 version, I believe.
Right, yes.
And typically, when there's large zoning changes, we have money in the budget to update it, and it's a little bit behind schedule. And we do have one in the town planning office that's full-size.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, does somebody want to make an amendment to, or a motion to hold this over until January 2nd, so, and keep the public hearing open?
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Okay, so we'll talk about this and put the wording in that we just talked about on January 2nd. Okay, C 17565. This is amending permitted uses in the Shorefront residential district to include accessory dwelling units, and further to amend 175-65C, amending permitting criteria for boathouses. Let's see. Okay, this is the Shorefront residential district we're talking about adding the accessory dwelling units as is required by the RSA, which was adopted in 2017, and then amend by deleting some of the wording and clarifying the wording. 175-67 is amending other sections. So go ahead on 175-65, please.
175-65C, it's the standards for one new boathouse. Planning board's recommendation is to delete subparagraph G, which removes the special use permit from the planning board requirement for a boathouse. It also says, it currently says the applicant has received a special use permit from the planning board or designee, which shall consider recommendation of the Conservation Commission prior to rendering a decision. So what the planning board just found out a couple of meetings ago was that the Conservation Commission often reviews and comments on all boathouses as part of the DES permit, and often refers to those very comments when the planning board acts on the said special use permit. And planning board found it rather, I'll say procedurally inane to have a special use permit where someone has already functionally demonstrated the same to meet the state statute and the administrative rules. So the planning board recommended removing this section because it's often occurring after the fact with the state permit. So this is consistent with the boathouse rules, changing the definition of boathouse to match the state and then removing the planning board review of said boathouse. The next part of that is
Well, do you want me to do the first one first, 65?
Yeah,
Okay.
either way.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll open the public hearing for 17565 Shorefront Residential Area. Go ahead, Roger.
What number article is that?
8,
It'll be in number 8, Suzanne.
page 9.
Yep, sorry. Page 9.
The board just adopted a new definition for accessory dwelling unit, which includes detached accessory dwelling units. Those are not permitted in the Shorefront Residence District under the proposed amendment. So B under 165 should be revised to read one single detached dwelling per lot with one accessory dwelling unit within or attached to the single-family dwelling. So you don't have a conflict.
Okay, well, this is being proposed because when the RSA was adopted, it said you could have the accessory dwelling units in all zones.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I'm not speaking
okay.
to that. What I'm
Okay.
talking about is that this, as read, would say that you could have a detached accessory dwelling unit in the Shorefront Residence District.
Unattached.
No, that's because you just adopted a definition
Yeah.
of an accessory dwelling unit, which
Yeah.
includes detached. That's what I'm trying to address.
Can we have the honor's comments on that?
This is the exact wording from every zoning district that the town adopted in 2017. The Shorefront Residential, for some reason, was one of the few districts where accessory dwelling units were not permitted. To me, I think B in every zoning district is superfluous because of the state statute that allows an accessory dwelling unit. But this is written exactly the way every district is. I think it's very clear that this is simply saying that you can have a single family, a single detached dwelling, and you are allowed, in fact, an accessory dwelling unit. I don't think this imparts in any way that one is allowed a detached, because the accessory dwelling unit ordinance as proposed in the amendment we haven't talked about says that Shorefront Residential does not allow detached.
Right, that they're specifically excluded from the Shorefront Residential. So the only one you can get is an attached, which you get by right anyway.
But unlike every other zoning district to which the town planner just referred, you cannot have a detached in this district. So why put the conflict in there? Why have this discussion? Why don't you just say you can't have a detached in there? It's got to be within or attached.
It's in the definition of accessory dwelling unit, which we will get to, which simply says you can't have one of that kind in the Shorefront Residential. This simply says you can have an accessory dwelling unit because the state says we have to let them be there.
Well, I guess it depends on whether you want to have a user-friendly, easily understood zoning ordinance, or you want to have maybe an argument with somebody who comes in the Shorefront district and say, hey, this says I can have an accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
An accessory dwelling unit can be attached. And then you can say, no, that's not correct, and have that discussion. Why don't you stay with it?
It is in the ordinance for the AD who's...
There would be no discussion. You'd simply refer the individual to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which states specifically you can't do what you want to do if you want to put a detached one there. There's no argument there, in my opinion, Roger.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, I see.
Good evening. I'm Carl Crosley. I'm speaking as chair of the Wentworth Watershed Association, and not as my residential status. In terms of accessory dwelling units, you were just discussing the difference between detached and attached, but later on, you're also talking about conditionally attached. And essentially, what you're permitting, given this system of regulation or ability of regulation in this town, is for separate units on any property in the shorefront. Given the effort this town has gone through over the decades to regulate and protect our water stuff, this seems significantly contradictory and destructive. Even if you had this in here, the system of monitoring in the past and the ability to monitor stuff probably, or I would say would be unlikely to regulate this adequately. So I would suggest that any conditioned space be eliminated, and if possible within state regulations, detached be eliminated as well. If I misheard your discussion with Roger Murray, I apologize.
So you would like to have it say attached accessory?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, questions? Yeah.
Hi, Cynthia Theodore. I know a lot of people in the audience are having trouble hearing, so hopefully we can speak clearly and loudly.
Okay, all right.
I just have a couple questions, and I'm just here as a citizen. And I've heard you say that the state of New Hampshire requires the town of Wolfeboro to have ADUs?
Yes, that's correct.
Any place, anywhere, anytime?
Attached one.
Any lot that can be developed with a single-family home is permitted an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That means any lot that can be built
What
upon
size is the lot?
whatever legal existing lot there is.
What is that? What is a legal existing lot?
It ranges the gamut from those approved in 1950 to those approved by today's standards.
Okay, so now I want to move to the lakeshore residential lots. As we all know, those lots are extremely small, really, really small. So if you already have a house, and I'm not, fighting this or saying, I'm just asking questions so I'm informed. So if you have an extremely small lot, like a lot of the houses on the lake have, and you want to put an accessory dwelling on, what about, do you need a separate septic system?
Yes.
Well, not separate, but large enough.
You need septic to accommodate it, yes.
Yeah.
You may not need a separate.
It may not be separate, so you can tap into a septic that's already there?
Right, and they would also have to meet setbacks and coverage.
I can't hear you.
They would need to meet the setbacks and coverage for that particular lot.
Okay, so a small lakefront lot may not have the room for a septic.
Correct.
It may not have the room for a septic or even for the structure.
Right.
Okay,
No,
I think, but what you're saying is you're making it sound so broad that any buildable lot in Wolfeboro can have an ADU on it.
Correct.
It can, but it's not a detached one. It's one
But not a
ins-
what?
Not a detached one, a separate building. It's one, in the Shorefront residential, it will be one inside the house already.
Right, attached.
Attached.
I'm speaking of detached.
That's not
So
in the
if
Shorefront.
It's not?
It will not be allowed in the Shorefront.
The shorefront will be exempt from ADUs?
From detached.
No.
Detached.
From detached ADUs?
Correct.
Okay. So all the ADUs that are there now will be grandfathered?
If there are, they would be, but I am not aware of any grandfathered ADUs.
Okay, well, why don't you continue with your comments?
Okay, so what you're saying is that the lake shore will be exempt from detached ADUs?
Yes.
Well, to be
That's
clear,
what-
the shorefront will be not exempt, but not permitted.
Correct.
What's the difference between exempt and permitted?
But really nothing. Why don't you?
Nothing?
Yeah.
Essentially
I mean,
nothing.
yeah,
Okay, well,
essentially
he
nothing.
made it sound like it was, okay.
Oh, okay,
Can I-
all right.
can
So just,
No, just a second, Julie.
yeah, I just want to make
Yeah,
one final
right.
thing. So right now, the state of New Hampshire is requiring Wolfeboro to have ADUs, and Wolfeboro is not allowed to have a separate zoning ordinance saying that those ADUs can only be in separate districts?
No.
In certain districts?
No.
But
Any
the
lot-
lake shore is exempt or excluded?
No. What we're currently talking about is catching, if you will, the shorefront residential district up with all the other zoning districts. For some reason, the town did not, when it put accessory dwelling units, they put it in general residential, commercial, everywhere, except shorefront. So this is simply putting in recognition of the state statute that in the shorefront district, any single-family lot that can be built with a single-family home can have an accessory dwelling unit.
except the lakefront.
No.
Even shorefront is permitted an accessory dwelling unit.
Just not a detached.
Right, well, detached, I'm specifically speaking detached. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, just because the statute requires it to be allowed does not mean it can occur. There are some people that cannot establish the required septic or other things that ultimately prevent it from getting a permit.
And that's good, so it's good that we have those.
The same way it would prevent some people from adding a bed. So you could have a single-family home and want to put on 2 more bedrooms.
Right.
You may not have the septic capacity for that, so the permit
Right.
can't be issued for that.
Right, but I was just specifically concerned
Yep.
right now about the shorefront and having extra septic systems put in. Because I know that those lots are very small, and a lot of the septic systems are extremely old.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Can't handle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Gordon Lang. I guess I'm coming back to Roger's original question, which I think I can understand clearly how we can say any lot can have an accessory dwelling unit except when it doesn't meet other requirements like the setback or the septic requirements. I get that. It seems contrary to logic, though, to say in one part of the law, one single detached dwelling per lot is available, it can be put in a particular area, in a particular zone, and then to say in another part of the law that you can't do that in that particular zone. And it seems like if you only happen on one part of the law, you go with what you see in front of you. You don't find the other part of the law that says you can't. One would have to master the whole of the town code in order to know that in one place it says you can and another place it says you can't. If I only find the one line that says I can do it, I think I can do it. Does it make any sense to write on the one hand I can do it and on the other hand I can't? Should we not make it clear here in this line?
We can consider, the planning board agrees to put attached accessory dwelling for the shorefront.
We're really talking apples and oranges. We're saying you can have an apple, but you can't have an orange. You can't have an orange, but is in another ordinance. Says you can't have that kind of of a fruit in your shorefront residential district. You can only have an attached accessory dwelling unit in your shorefront residential district. So I don't see the logical contrast here that you and Roger do.
Right now, it's all on our minds, and so we're thinking about that and seeing it, and yet if we pass this line, it would tell me I could have a single
Okay, do you
detached.
agree that there's sort of a simple solution to this of just adding a word in the shorefront?
I don't think we need to add the word, Madam Chairwoman. I think what we've written stands.
That's fine, but we can talk about it by adding attached accessory dwelling in the shorefront.
That would seem to be something that we already have, and what we're proposing in other language here is to have a detached accessory dwelling unit in all areas except in the shorefront,
which we will get to later on this evening when we come to discuss attached accessory dwelling units.
I'd like to make a blanket statement. If you would read both of those lines, line A and line B, everybody's putting in the extra word. Each one says one single detached dwelling. It means a house. It doesn't say in the second part of that, detached anywhere. And I keep hearing everybody put detached or attached over there. I think you need to read it really closely. It's confusing. But the first half means house, then the second half means accessory dwelling unit. You see what the stumbling block is there? You're using the word detached again in the second half.
Yeah, okay.
I think everybody needs to read it really closely because it's confusing. It's too wordy.
I'm going to sit down. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Linda. No, Suzanne, Linda had her, sorry.
Hard to tell who you're talking to. Linda Murray. I understand that this is very confusing. That's what you're getting here. Because what they can't distinguish is there is the detached unit and there is the attached unit. And yes, you did a nice job. There it is. But if you add the word attached, you'll get rid of the confusion that you're hearing constantly from the public. And these are to be user-friendly to the people who are using them. You may understand, but obviously people are confused by your language.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I'm going to beat that dead horse. It seems like you were trying to address perhaps a boathouse as an accessory building, and you've got it's just a conflicting with Article 2D, which says. The detached units are permissible in all zones excluding shorefront, and yet, as was pointed out, this article says they're allowed. So again, I think you need to amend this to take out the word detached under B and resolve the issue.
Read it closely, Suzanne. It doesn't say detached.
Yeah.
No, I think Suzanne's referring to the first instance of detached.
The heading says accessory dwelling unit, shorefront. Then you go down to B, and it says one single detached dwelling per lot with one accessory dwelling unit. That D has to be cleaned up because...
I'm going to have to defer to Linda Murray here. There's obviously a whole bunch of confusion. People people don't seem to understand. So here's a suggestion. If we were to eliminate A altogether and make B A, would that help at all?
Well, however you fix it, just make it so it doesn't conflict with Article 2.
Well, it won't conflict with Article 2, because we're not talking about detached accessory dwelling units.
I think for the board's guidance, most of the zoning ordinances make reference to specific uses, and then you have to go to that section to understand what the use is.
Right.
Exactly.
Does the word detached actually serve any function in A or B? And if we took that out, would it, if we just had a single dwelling, one single dwelling?
Then it could be like a duplex.
But they can have an accessory dwelling unit.
What's it detached from? I'm trying to figure out what the dwelling is detached from.
Another dwelling unit.
But I only have one single dwelling.
Well, arguably, the lawyers in the world would love to have the word detached removed, because arguably, if you only can have an attached accessory dwelling unit, you have an attached two-unit structure. I think I'm sensing that many people in the room are very concerned about the later article discussion on detached accessory dwelling units, and that's sort of permeating every other discussion item.
Agreed.
Right.
Every zoning district says A, one single detached dwelling. Anywhere it also says one single detached dwelling, the board has, and the voters have approved the wording, one single detached dwelling unit per lot with one accessory dwelling unit. All this proposal is to do is make shorefront residential read like all of the other zoning districts. Yet with the other article proposing a change to allow detached in some districts, it seems that I honestly don't know what the concern is, because I've yet to have any builder or developer, homeowner or otherwise be confused by this language to the extent expressed here.
So I wonder if we just go through the whole ordinance, and unless we're talking detached accessory dwelling units, we get rid of the word detached.
My recommendation to the board is to rewrite and renotice to modify the language of every zoning district to say one detached dwelling unit, B, accessory dwelling unit per section blank, and move on.
Why do we need detached And why can't it just be one single dwelling?
It could be one single dwelling, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Because we use it differently.
We do.
Yeah.
I mean, if the word detached is really thwarting this many people, maybe the word detached needs to come out, and we'll revamp all the zoning districts to say, one single-family dwelling, B, accessory dwelling unit per section X.
Is it
and move on.
necessary that we specify that an accessory dwelling unit is allowed in a shorefront residential district since it is allowed by
I'm
the
only
state?
following it because that's how the town originally did it following the 2017
Understood.
statute. No, it is generally understood by the world that any single-family lot also can have an accessory dwelling
And
unit.
we're trying to be clear to the public also.
Correct.
So, okay, any other, okay, Roger?
Since I precipitated this discussion, I think what you have here is better than most of the suggestions. Obviously, I think mine's better, but if you're going to go with this, I think you should leave it the way it is.
After all that.
I still think I'm right and you should make the change.
That's
but
fine.
I'm not going to do that. I think this is the best.
Okay, any other comments on Shorefront Residential 175-65? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Planning board members, how do you want to proceed? There's a suggestion that we simply add to the accessory dwelling units attached in order to be clearer.
I'm going to revamp and run with Roger's suggestion and let the language stand. That's my suggestion.
Okay?
Before we second that, I suggest that we go through the entire ordinance and get rid of one single detached dwelling unit per lot, wherever it applies, and only use detached when we're talking about accessory dwelling units by special exception that we'll discuss later, just so it's not confusing. So I move to remove detached from all of the zoning districts and use that term only when we're talking about something we'll talk about in a few minutes, hopefully.
Could I ask you to hold that motion until after March of next year? And then, because you're talking about something really substantial and multiple hearings, multiple warrant articles?
It functionally could probably be done for January 6th. It's just, it's actually going to be a very confusing looking warrant article because it's going to refer to every district, removing the word detached.
Yeah.
And we've already confused
In multiple places.
But that is
enough,
giving us
they-
heartburn here.
Well, I think as Roger suggested, I beg your pardon, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. I think Roger's solution to let the language stand and coincides with Tavis's observation that similar language is found throughout, is the best solution that we have here.
I
But let it
honestly
stand.
did not expect this to get anywhere near this much
Neither
attention.
did I.
Okay, any other planning board comments? Then I'd entertain a motion on 175-65.
So this is
Storefront res-
175-65B, the accessory dwelling unit addition?
Yeah, 175.
The first question in article, or the first part of the question on Article 8.
So I move
Okay.
that we keep the language as written in this ordinance as we just came around to, and then next year, work on removing detached from all of the zoning districts.
Next year's changes are going to be much more sweeping, yes.
Do you want that
Second.
second part as part of your motion?
Yes.
Okay,
Seconded.
motion has been made and seconded. Any other comments? Then I'll ask for a vote on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right. Very good. 170, okay. Okay, the next one is 175-67. This is in page 9 and 10, amending.
We haven't done Boathouse yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
175-65C.
C, okay. Okay, does somebody want to make a motion on the boathouse?
You have to hold a whole public hearing on that. We haven't gone there yet.
I thought we did the
We did it on the
whole-
definition, not the change.
Yeah, I thought 175, 65,
We're simply changing the
and
lettering.
65C were all one. It's
Well,
listed as one.
We're
We're just
changing.
re-lettering C and D. We're not changing anything else.
No, if you look on page 9, there was no public hearing on the second part of the question under Article 8.
Yeah, the boathouse part.
Okay.
Which is
all
to
right.
eliminate G.
Correct.
Okay, all right, then, you want- that I should open this
Open
public
the
hearing
public
for the
hearing for-
boathouse? Oh, okay, all right, so this would be Shorefront Residential District, 175-65C, amending permitting criteria for boathouse. And this is all part of C on your public hearing notice. So does anybody want to make any comments on the boathouse? Okay, and that's on page 9. Everybody all set then? Okay, close the public hearing. Someone want to make a motion?
I move that we adopt the changed language in 175-65C regarding boathouse, deleting paragraph G and substituting new language in paragraph G as stated.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right. Item D on the list of amendments, 175-67, amending shorefront lot improvement standards. This is amending sections of the shorefront improvement standards to sort of help with enforcement. Tavis, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, on the bottom of page 9 in paragraph C, and then again in D, is removing the word stormwater management from those two paragraphs. It's conflicting with the stormwater management regulations that the planning board adopted as part of the site plan regulations during the past year. It's not that stormwater management isn't required, it's not changing any part of the element other than to remove the conflicting language between a stormwater management plan. The other part at the end of C is at the very bottom of the paragraph, comma, unless otherwise accepted by this regulation. There are beach properties that cannot satisfy C as written, but there are criteria to address the same standard within the existing shorefront regulations. Paragraph D, again, simply proposing to remove the stormwater management reference. And E goes to enforcement. All proposed stormwater management systems must be verified by either on-site inspection by town building inspector, on-site inspection by licensed engineer, and removes the currently allowed photographic documentation as part of the approval process.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the public hearing on this item, 175-67, amending shorefront lot improvement standards. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Planning board members, how would you like to proceed with this?
I'm happy to make a motion to adopt the language as amended.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. Okay, 175-143 through 145. These sections are to be deleted entirely. And this amendment proposes deleting this section that refers to multifamily development. That's 3 units or more. This also would include eliminating the restriction of 5 units per building. And also include some of the uses in specific zones. So this is to delete it, and then we'll go on to the next one to show where the multifamily would be allowed. Okay, so this has been in existence for quite some time. Do you want to add anything else?
I think, well, with your, I'm turning the bullet points into letters as you've been going along. I think the bullet points on the agenda are being turned into letters by the chair. So we're talking about E 175, 143 through 145, and then right below it is F. So for those that aren't aware, section 175, 143 through 145 currently are the town's regulations on multifamily dwelling, and what it does is it refers to all of the base zoning districts and provides development criteria for multifamily development within those districts. So it's sort of it's a two-part proposal. It starts on page 10 of the voter guide, which covers both the deletion of the existing 143 through 144, and then moves the same regulations from those existing sections into the base zoning districts.
Okay, but the first one that I read is to eliminate.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll open the public hearing on this item. Okay.
Hi, Audrey Klein, North Main Street. I would like to suggest that you hear this one after you've heard the other one, in case the other one doesn't fly and you haven't already eliminated what's existing in the ordinance.
Well, this is just a public hearing. They won't be eliminated if we vote to eliminate them. It has to go before the voters. It's not actual elimination. It's all a matter of argument.
We're just talking about eliminating it, and then we'll go into the substance at the next amendment.
Okay, my point was if the substance of the next doesn't gain approval to go forward, you will have an article that asks to eliminate something with nothing to replace it.
No, obviously that would not happen. We would not be able to do that.
That's not obvious to me, sorry.
Yeah.
The agenda is simply lining out the line-by-line changes to the existing regulations the planning board has proposed articles to. The article combines the two of them together to be effective together.
Okay. Does that make sense?
If that's the way it is, yes.
Okay, so any other comments on the, yeah, go ahead.
Good evening again. I have one specific concern, is the inclusion in this multifamily dwellings to the Center Street Route 28 mixed-use business district. That district was created specifically to allow a business of moderate density and use. Adding multifamilies to this would significantly increase the usage of the property, which are several dozen yards upstream of the Shorefront residential district, all of which drains into it. The two properties that the two parcels which consist of this are surrounded by environmentally sensitive properties, and to increase the density use in those areas would be detrimental to the downstream effect on Lake Wentworth. Thank you.
Okay, and it's multifamily is already allowed in that district. No. I'm just talking about the deleting section. I mean, it's already mentions commercial districts.
Currently, section 175, 144 says various residential zones and all commercial properties other than the central business district and the Wolfeboro Falls district are allowed multifamily. All commercial districts include Center Street Route 28. So the chair is correct that the Center Street Route 28 mixed-use district currently allows multifamily dwellings.
Okay, so all we're doing is deleting the section and putting it in each individual zone.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
I guess I wasn't aware that we were talking about these both at the same time, so I have...
No, we're not. I'm trying to keep it one at a time, because
Okay, so we're not going on to the substance of moving them into other sections yet.
Well, all we're doing is talking about deleting this section right now so that we can move it to other sections. And that's the second one.
And we'll talk about that after you've...
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other comments? Okay, Suzanne?
Okay, the accessory dwelling units now are allowed where?
All zones.
All zones.
What?
All zones.
Okay. It helps the public to know where these things are on the...
We're talking about deleting a multifamily section from
Right.
the ordinance.
Yeah, and...
Okay.
And all of the accessory dwelling units are allowed in all districts that allow residential homes.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
I know you've got your hands full, but it's helpful if you tell us what article and page you're on.
Yeah, I know. I
I'm
keep
sorry.
forgetting. I'm sorry about that. Okay.
So
All
for,
right.
for clarification, what's being discussed is the first part of Article 9 on page 10.
Oh.
Specifically to delete Article 23, multifamily dwelling, Section 175, 143 through 145.
Okay, so anybody else want to make a comment on deleting this? Okay, all right.
I just have a simple question. Why is this being proposed? Why are we thinking about putting multifamily dwellings in every district?
Because they're already allowed.
Section 145, 143 through 145 already allows multifamily in each of these zones. What's confusing to the public is when you look at the zoning district, multifamily isn't listed. You have to know, as we discussed earlier, about the other section of the ordinance that's way in the back. So what this is doing is moving what you might call the hidden section and putting it in each of the base zoning districts.
The hidden section?
Bad choice of words.
I'm sorry?
Bad choice of word.
Well, the
stuff in the back.
It's stuff in the back. You have to know what's there.
Right.
Just like every zone is allowed a single-family dwelling in an ADU, but for user comfort, we put in one accessory dwelling unit in each zone. But we're not talking about accessory dwelling units. I don't want to open that one
We're
right
in the
up.
section that's talking about multifamily dwellings.
Correct.
And they're allowed in every zone now?
So
Yes, they are.
yes, they are. If you were going to
Yes, they are. Well, commercial, and yes, that's right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't hear what you said. Are they allowed in every district?
They are allowed
This
in every.
gentleman's saying they're not.
Well, he's an attorney. They are allowed.
That's right. I mean, I'm glad he's saying that. So
They are allowed in every district that's specified in 143 through 145.
Yeah, right.
and that's every district. I mean, I don't have the
It's
statute
not.
in front of me.
No, it's not
So
every
let's
district.
make it easy. What districts are they not allowed in?
It's easier to go to the voters guide and look at pages
But
10.
you just said it's hidden and it's hard to find.
No, I'm telling you exactly where it is right now. It's allowed in the village residential. It's allowed in the residential. It's allowed in the general residential.
So what?
It's allowed in the Bay Street Limited Business District. It's allowed in the Pine Hill Road Development District. It's allowed in the Center Street Route 28 Mixed Use Business District. It's allowed in the Commercial District C1 Central Business District CBD. It's allowed in the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District.
Okay, so what's the amendment?
Could I try?
I mean, you're putting this to the vote, you're putting this to the vote in March.
Right, right.
If these people in the room,
Okay, all we're doing, this part is to delete this section and put it into all of the different zones that Tav
all
has
I'm
just
asking is
mentioned.
what's being amended. There's a question right here. Are we in favor?
No, what this is proposing to do, not that we're really talking about it yet, this is proposing to do is take it from a page that you have to hunt for in the ordinance and put it in the base zoning districts.
Kathy, could I try explaining it?
Yep, go ahead. Raj.
So currently, there's a separate section in the zoning ordinance that governs where you can build multifamily homes. And they are permitted in almost every district. But by looking in the separate district zoning ordinances, there's no reference to tell you to go look at that multifamily section. So what we're trying to do is delete the multifamily section, which currently stands alone, and instead put the regulations governing multifamily into each separate district, so that each separate district will stand alone and you won't have to know to refer to that separate section. And it should make it easier for people to interpret, since they don't have to go look at a separate section.
Well, alls I can think about is when the town being confused when we went to the Brewster Beach issue. That amendment, that warrant was literally like 1.5 sentences, and it was beyond confusing to most people. So I can only imagine what's going to happen in March when you put all of these changes in front of us to many, many, many ill-informed citizens. So I think maybe if you do what you're planning on doing, you should have some type of session to inform the residents in every, this is tonight?
That's what we're doing.
I don't get the feeling tonight that you are giving us.
Okay, all right, but
I'm
we...
just saying, as a citizen.
Oh, okay, well, we do...
It's confusing, and you really should explain it better. None of this, it's hidden, it's in the back, you need to know where to look for it. We don't have an official zoning map, we have that. Just saying.
Just to
thank
be
you.
clear, actually, is we're trying to make it more user-friendly. We have a document that we don't think works very well, and yes, it's confusing. We're putting it in each section where it's already allowed, but it's not something you have to look in the back for anymore. So.
Suzanne?
I'll address this to Tavis, our town planner. You know, it would have been helpful to have a slide presentation up there. I tried making some maps showing where these changes are going to occur. I wasn't too successful with it. But the map's there, Tavis. You could get up and go to it and point out these different sections that are being changed, amended, taken away, added. And think about the voting booth. Peter Goodwin was absolutely correct. When the board sat here and trying to figure this out since August, he said, how are people going to know where this is? People don't know what 175-231CD is. They don't know that, and they go in the voting booth with this. As a minimum, as town planner, you need to put that map on the wall, which is allowed, outside where they have the voting questions, so people can refer to it.
It is on... It is on the town website also, the zone map.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ken?
So could I ask for the town planner to clarify which districts the multifamily dwellings are not allowed? I'm assuming the bold print on Article 9, page 10, lists the districts in which it is allowed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So would you clarify for the audience which areas they are not allowed in? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, they want to know which residential.
I know.
Okay, well, Tavis is trying to come up with the list.
It looks like shorefront residential, rural residential, and residential agriculture.
Okay, would you say that again, Tavis? I don't know if people heard it. The ones where it is not allowed.
Shorefront residential, rural residential, and the residential agriculture. So on the big map, the light green, the white, and the 300-foot strip around the water bodies is shown.
Oh.
The light green, the light green closest to your left hand. Yep, the light green. All the white to your left. And the ring around all of the lakes. Sort of a dark green, the shorefront residential.
Thank you, Lenore.
Okay. Okay. Okay, can I close the public hearing on?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to, yes, right, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing on the deletions.
The deletions only.
Only, okay. Okay, and planning board members, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here on this. If you look through the book, you have certain sections, village residential, rural residential, and if I'm going to go to village residential, I'm going to open it up and it's going to give me my permitted uses. And then there's uses that are by special exception. Multifamily dwelling is in permitted by special exception. And then you would have to go to multifamily, which is Article 23, multifamily dwellings in a separate section, and then you would read through all that stuff. So what I have a concern about here is the density usage for the village residential, where it bases the lot density is based on 7,620 square feet per unit allowed on a lot. And the way I'm seeing it here is it says density shall not exceed 2 units per acre for lots. And so we're actually losing the ability for lots. And
we should hold that, John, until we get to the next part of this
I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
And so we can think about that moving forward. That's why I brought that up.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that we're not taking something away that's already allowed.
Yeah, to the issue at hand, I move that we accept the deletion of Article 23, multifamily dwellings, 175, 143 through 145.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right. Moving right along here to 175. Okay, 175-71. This is Village Residential. Residential District, G Residential Bay Street Limited, Pine Hill Development District, South Wolfeboro Limited Business District, Center Street Route 28 Mixed Business District, Commercial C1, the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District, to have multifamily language added as permitted uses, language amended and moved from 175-4 through 145, multifamily dwellings respectably. Okay, so what we're talking about is to, as we've said, is to allow multifamily districts in a number of these that I have just gone through. And if you're talking about a multifamily, you're going to talk about a site plan review because they have more than 3 units. So they would need to come to the planning board, and I'll let Tavis take this off. Okay.
Well, that's really it. We've been touching on this for a while. This part of the hearing that you're going to open is just to take the language moved from 143, 145 and put it into the base zones, and there's a couple of modifications to the language. Specifically in the VR and all the VR, the R, and all the R districts and the commercial districts other than CBD and Wolfeboro Falls, there was a limitation on conversions to no more than 4 units, and in the commercial business district in the Wolfeboro Falls, there was a limitation on no more than 6 units per building. Planning board discussed that, could find no rationale for a building to be limited in the number of units provided it met the density. So that's where that change came from.
Right, but in the central business district in Wolfeboro Falls, there is no change to the density, just...
No, there's no proposed change to density in any of the districts.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this item. Okay, go ahead.
Have to bear with me. I have a lot of stuff here. May I pass these out so everybody can follow along?
Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
So I want to address first, a couple of weeks ago I looked at the voter's guide and I saw the multifamily section, and it concerned me, so I started digging into what this language meant. My first thought was, I don't believe that the section in the multifamily Article 175, 143 to 145 allows by right multifamily in the sections that it lists. There's principles in analyzing the construction of the zoning ordinance where you read it as a whole, and I think if you read it as a whole, you will find that the sections that it's listed presently in the ordinance, if you look on the page with mostly the blue chart on the top, there's a variety of ways that it's permitted and a variety of ways that it's not permitted. It's permitted by special exception, it's not permitted, it's permitted by right, it's permitted except for the first floor, it's permitted only for elderly housing. So in all the zones, it's specifically permitted or not permitted historically. And as you know, Wolfeboro zoning has permissive zoning, which means that we specifically list what is permitted, and if it's not listed, it is not permitted. So that's the basis of our zoning, is that what is in each individual zone. I'm somewhat confused as to why Section 175, 143 through 145 is seen as superseding the permissions that are in the zoning.
Okay, that's the way it's written and has been in there for a while.
So when you say that's the way it's written, what part of that is written that permits and overrides what is written in each zone?
It's right in the ordinance itself.
Yes.
According to town council, that's correct.
Yeah, right.
Can you tell me what that is?
So Audrey, in 175-144 currently, for requirements for VR, R, and GR in all commercial districts except CBD and WF districts, paragraph A reads, multifamily dwellings with no more than 5 dwelling units per building are permitted.
I understand that, but my view and what I'm trying to present is that section isn't saying that those areas that are listed override what's in the zoning. That's saying when it's permitted in another section of the zoning, you must meet the standards that's written in 175-143.
That's not the opinion of council, and section 143 overrides that.
I understand that. However, I think the question and the answer can be directed to have a bigger conversation about what might have been said about that. So there's 3 basic rules when you go to, you read any of the decisions of the court. When determining what the zoning ordinance is conveying, they consider the ordinance as a whole. So that includes the present ordinance with all the places where it's permitted and not permitted. That's part of the ordinance. It's not lesser than the 147, the section on the multi-unit buildings. It's at least equivalent in order to that. The purpose and intent calls out what is intended in the residential districts. One of them specifically says we would like multifamily. The other 2 don't. So there's another drop in the bucket that says we knew what we were talking about when we made this chart. And this is not by accident. They didn't accidentally say that it's permitted by special exception, it's not permitted, it's permitted by right. They didn't do that by accident and then have another section that overrode all of that. That doesn't make sense. That's the number 3 kind of rule is you shall not construe the ordinance in a way that leads to an absurd result. And the way this is being read is an absurd result. It's overriding all of the decisions that were made, very detailed decisions in each zone about what they wanted to happen in those zones. So the third part is when terms are not defined in the ordinance, you use a common dictionary. The section 175, 143, 145 only says when that multifamily must adhere to, does it say construction standards? I don't have it in front of me. What's the first, the purpose?
This is your comment period.
Yeah.
Well, I thought maybe one of you could give me a hand.
Go ahead, Tavis.
Well, I guess the question
The
is...
multifamily section says that...
I guess the question before the board is, regardless of the discussion that is being presented, does the board believe that multifamily should be permitted as outlined in the base zoning districts? And that was the discussion the board had all along.
Right.
The board had more than one discussion about how to look at increasing housing opportunities in zones, and further believed that the multifamily section should have been included in the base zones, and hence the origin of the article.
Right.
So I went back and I listened to all the discussion from, I think, as far back as June that I could find that the board had. And the presumption of this article was that you weren't really changing anything. This was already allowed. You were simply moving it around into the other sections. That's been said tonight. It was said in several of the recordings. That, in fact, is not the case. If you move these into these sections, you're changing the zoning significantly. If you look at the second page with the pink and the blue, you can see what changes if you take this out of the multifamily section, which is meant to read When otherwise permitted, you must use these standards. When otherwise permitted by the section, by the nonprofit and elderly section, you can have multifamily housing anywhere, and in many zones. You still need to use those construction standards. The inclusionary zoning, if you're having multifamily housing in those zones, you need to use those construction standards that are in 175, 143. If you get a variance for multifamily housing, you need to go back to 175, 143 and use those construction standards. That's how that section is meant to be used. Again, if you do take everything out of that section and put it into the individual sections in the middle page with the orange and the blue, you've changed a lot. There's a lot of difference in that, and I don't think the board recognized that, so therefore did not really have conversations about each one of these things. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do it. I'm saying they weren't addressed because you thought you were just moving them to another section without looking at what the impacts were.
I don't understand why you would be telling me that I don't understand what I did. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Audrey. I was pretty aware of what was going on.
So you were aware of all these things in the orange here?
No, I'm kind of shocked by your presentation. I haven't had a chance to digest it. You gave it to me 10 minutes ago.
Let me also go to, in the case that you're not convinced by my arguments here, the last argument I'm going to make is for 30 years, or 25 years, we have had a multifamily ordinance. And the administrative gloss is, it's always been read and enforced the way it is on the chart, not the way that you're suggesting that it should be. And given that administrative gloss, whether you like how it's been read or not, the Supreme Court has said that administrative gloss is placed on an ambiguous clause of the zoning ordinance when those responsible for its implementation interpret the clause in a consistent manner and apply it to similar situation applicants over a period of years without legislative interference. I looked and I couldn't find a single multifamily house that didn't go through the processes on this chart because that's not the way it was regulated. So that's kind of my last comment on that. If you look on the little flap underneath.
All of the multifamily will have to go through a site plan review.
I know.
With the planning board.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if you look at all the multifamily housing in Wolfeboro, it's either pre-zoning or it's gone through a special exception or a variance or one of the things that's required from the zone in the chart. It has never been just permitted by right. We probably might have some more if it were, but there aren't any.
Oh, okay, well, it's not really permitted by right. What I'm saying is they would have to come for a site plan review before the planning board for multifamily.
That would be after they were permitted in the zone or by variance or by special exception or whatever it says in the zones. Village residential, special exception. Residential, not permitted. General residential, not permitted. Rural residential, it's not permitted. CBD1, permitted by right. Pine Hill Road, permitted by right. South Wolfeboro, permitted by right. Bay Street, permitted except for first floor. Wolfeboro Falls, permitted except for first floor. Center Street, permitted for elderly housing only. They didn't go through this because it was permitted everywhere. It's specifically permitted, and that was the way it was enforced and regulated for 25 years. And that's a standard. So I think I would really like it if you would take some time and look at some of the really nuance to what the previous regulations allowed for. I don't know if this was done on purpose, but for instance, it's removed the incentive to renovate existing buildings because it's reduced the density that's allowed. I don't think that's a positive thing. I think we want to keep our historic architecture. We don't want to incentivize tearing it down and building a new one. It's removed the number of limits on dwellings per building, which might create large mass structures in areas where they don't really belong. And this is really important, it removes the restriction on no residential apartments on the first floor in our commercial areas. We have 3 wonderful, independent, separate character commercial areas, the downtown, Back Bay, and Wolfeboro Falls. Those areas want to leave the commercial first floor open for development. We don't want residential on the first floor, and this removes that, and I think that's a real problem there. I think we want to undo that. I think that's about it, unless you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question for the planner. Has council reviewed the proposed language?
Council has reviewed the proposed changes. I also would disagree. This is not proposing to remove the prohibition on apartments on the first floor. It simply says that multifamily is allowed in the zone. The same zone still says...
Rather than getting into the weeds, what was council's opinion?
This is consistent with the existing language.
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
These comments pertain to the village residential, the residential, and the general residential is listed here. I think Audrey touched on some of these, but this does eliminate the requirement that multifamily dwellings have no more than 5 dwelling units. I think that there was a recent proposal for a development that would have been, and I don't mean the one that was approved, much larger than 5 units in a prominent location. I think the people of the town made it clear that they were not enthusiastic about that. There's also throughout, actually this goes through all of these, there's language missing from the last line of under density, which reads, so long as the density requirements are met for all units. What's missing is more than one building may be located on a lot of record, and I think that should be in there. Audrey did mention currently you can convert to 4 units per acre for a existing residential structure. It's by special exception, and you do have to have 7,260 square feet per unit for the conversion. That's been eliminated. And when you look at the conversions, which at least on the residential are under C, it says the conversion shall be limited by paragraphs A and B above. That's small a, small b. There is no small a or small b above. So whether this means you can put an unlimited number of units in residential structures so long as you don't expand the building. I don't know whether we're looking for there was a guy in Japan who made the news by living in a 95 square foot apartment, and I don't know whether that's the goal here, but it's not clear whether that applies or the 2 units per acre for lots that's on the first line. If you do look at the conversion, and I think John has expressed concern about this, if you can convert put in 4 units with 7,260 square feet, that comes out to 29,040 square feet or 2/3 of an acre. So based on the current zoning, you could put in, convert to 4 units on 2/3 of an acre. Under this, you could convert to 2 units on 1 acre. Particularly in the village residential, that does not seem to make sense. The purpose of putting that conversion in which went in, I think, years ago, maybe even as far back as the 70s, was to preserve some of the large old colonial buildings or the older buildings in town, which might be becoming obsolete. And I thought if you could convert them to apartments, which would satisfy a need, that would also rehabilitate the buildings and keep them around a little longer. When you get to the commercial districts, except for the central business and the Wolfeboro Falls, again, it eliminates the 5-unit per building limitation. It has the missing language, gets rid of the 4 units conversion. And in Bay Street, limited business district, there is actually a small a and a small b, so that when it says the conversion shall be limited by paragraphs A and B, A density, that does make clear that you're limited on a conversion to 2 units per acre. On the Pine Hill Road, and on the Pine Hill Road, at the top of page 15, where it lists, not in boldface, A, B, C, and D, B is not currently in the ordinance. So the 1 single detached dwelling per lot with 1 accessory dwelling is an addition. What's in the ordinance right now is 1 accessory dwelling. And when you read this, it could be interpreted as saying not only do you get 1 single detached dwelling per lot with 1 accessory dwelling, but you get 1 accessory dwelling unit. So I think you need to get B says what I think you want to have in there, and C should be eliminated.
Correct. He's correct.
In that case, where it says the conversion shall be limited by paragraphs A and B are parking requirements. There's no A and B in density, so you'll presumably you may be limited to 2 per acre, or you may have an unlimited number of units you can put in there. South Wolfeboro, A and B again are parking requirements. There's no relation. The density does not mention parking requirements, so you have the same dilemma. When you move on to the Center Street, again, you've got A and B under parking requirements, but no density is not addressed when converting a single-family residence. Central Business District.
If it's helpful, the intent of the conversion shall be limited by paragraphs A and B. Each of those sections is referring to density and parking requirements. That's how it's currently constructed, and that's how the reference needs to be corrected in each of the zones. Where this falls apart is where you take the multifamily language and, if you will, cut and paste it into a zone, and the numbering doesn't follow with you because it's looking at other formatting in the page. So for each of the districts where it talks about conversion of existing family residence, the paragraph that says the conversion shall be limited by paragraphs A and B or 1 and 2 or what have you are intended to point to the first being density, the second being the parking requirements of the district. So that's for all of them.
Okay, so in the residential and in the other business districts, it would be
correct. It's
2
all
units.
based on density and parking.
It would be 2
yes.
units per acre. Okay.
Yes.
In the commercial central business district, and also this applies to the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District, it eliminates the limitation of 6 units per building. Here the density would be 6 units per acre, the current density, but it's, as Tavis explained, that would apply. This does eliminate the provision allowing residential units in buildings which also contain commercial units. That is no longer in the ordinance, and also eliminates the density calculation where you have commercial and residential units on the same lot. And what particularly the central business district and Wolfeboro Falls, it looks like a essentially residential ordinance for multifamily dwellings was taken and shoehorned into a commercial district where it really doesn't fit. I mean, I think if you're going to do multifamily dwellings, you need to look at what I would think the density in the village residential should not be the same as the residential or the general residential. And you should be targeting to each of the districts and sort of just doing a blanket approach. I think that right now the Lake Region Planning Commission is completing its housing needs assessment. I think that should provide good information for the board going forward. I think that there are problems with what appears here, and rather than try and rush to get something out, you've got 180 units that are coming through the approval process. So I don't see an immediate need. You're not going to do anything faster than those. And that should give you some time to review this and target something. Look at the need, how can you best address it, and how are you going to get positive results? I mean, I was on a master plan committee that said that we needed diversity of housing in the town, and I firmly believe that. But I think one of the problems you have is, unfortunately, Wolfeboro is just a really nice place to live. It's a wonderful place to live. And people who sell their house somewhere south of here and want to get out, they come up with a big bankroll and they paid large sums of money for housing. And Harriman Hill got approval for another phase of their project, and they can't do it because the numbers don't work. They have to revise that. And we have to come up with a way that'll actually function and we'll get the result we're looking for. One other point, which is, and this really doesn't have to do with the text of the zoning, but under each of these amendments, it says that it's to clarify the language for permitting and project review. That's not an accurate statement. These are making significant major changes to the ordinance. And when you look at the statute on amending the ordinance, RSA 675:3, Roman numeral 7, it says we have assortment of amendments. You say, are you in favor of amendment number blank proposed by the Wolfeboro Planning Board? And then at the end it says, here insert topical description of the substance of the amendment. We don't have that here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairwoman. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Ann Blodgett, I've been before you a few times. I've been watching you guys. I'm still confused, and I've told you that over and over again. I don't have any more confidence in these changes than I did before. I think there's evidence before all of you that the voters are confused. Is that what you want? As I look at this chart, if these impacts are true, what are we doing to our sewer, our traffic, our property values, our water quality, our town gateways, our tourism appeal, our overall housing economics? And as Roger stated, the new units coming on and the short-term rentals out there. That's housing inventory that's misappropriately allocated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else want to speak? Okay.
Mal Blodgett. Yeah, I'm just listening tonight and just hearing a lot of confusion amongst everybody in this room. And I think that before it goes to the voters, some sort of, and I realize this is a public forum, and every single voter should be here that's concerned about these issues. But I don't think they'd come because I don't know if I've learned much tonight in the time that I've spent, unfortunately, other than I would probably, at this point in time, vote for everything as in the no category. And I know that does not serve a good purpose. You've done a ton of work, I'm sure, and there's a lot of good things that are in here, but I cannot parse them out. I'm sorry. I think that Audrey's mentioned that there could be, and I would tend to believe her. She's a professional. That there's a lot of unintended consequences that could occur if these changes take place. I think the voters would, at a minimum, need some sort of presentation before the March vote to understand even a part of this. I understand that there's some housekeeping issues. Word change here and there, that's should go without saying. It's very understandable. I think we have to obviously be in compliance with the state regulations in terms of detached dwelling units. But in and amongst those changes seems to be a lot of zoning changes that are occurring here. And I'm not smart enough to figure out all the consequences, and I would tend to not support them until I know a lot more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Linda Murray. I'm speaking as one selectman and not for the Board of Selectmen. In the Board of Selectmen's packet for its December 7th meeting is a water and sewer rate study. This study was done to provide the Board of Selectmen with the information needed to make a sound decision on increasing the town water and sewer rates. It is the review of that study that brings me here tonight to make my comments. The town has 2,631 water connections and 1,037 sewer connections. The town's consulting engineer will be recommending increasing the sewer rates by 9% for 2023 and 3% increase for 2024 through 2027, and water rate increase by 4% in 2023 and 2% increase for 2024 to 2027. The Water Fund's estimated cost for the capital projects from 2023 to 2027 is $4.6 million. And for the sewer fund, it's $11.5 million. This is just to maintain the existing system. What concerns me is the capacity of the town's water source, Upper Beach Pond. When I became a selectman in 2005, the town had already developed a new water source using Lake Winnipesaukee, somewheres off of Clark Road. I am also concerned about adding houses to North Main Street water line, since the North Main Street water line is one of the town's vintage lines, and I believe it's about 100 years old. This line should not be overtaxed. For our sewer system, I am concerned about the capacity of the affluent disposal system. The RIB site can handle about 340 gallons per year. The worn-out spray fields are designated to handle about 30 million gallons per year. The cost to the town just to develop the RIB site in 2008 was $6.7 million. The capacity of the town's water and sewer system is a key element as to whether and to what degree the town should increase the density of housing units. When the planning board started down the path to increase the density of housing units, Dave Ford informed the planning board that he had questions regarding the capacity of the water and sewer system. Based on his concern, the Board of Selectmen ordered a capacity study of the water and sewer system, which is scheduled to be completed in the next couple of weeks. I am surprised that the planning board did not hold off on proposing zoning changes that will increase housing units on the town's infrastructure without understanding the impact increase on the demand to our water and sewer system. It is critical that the planning board has all the information on the impact of increasing housing units before rushing forward with zoning ordinances. I therefore request that the planning board table these warrant articles until a later year when they have time to review the capacity study.
Okay, other comments?
Chris Kaiser, 16 Allen Road. We came here in 2009 for all the reasons you live here too. It's a beautiful town, but more importantly, I've been involved in planning commissions in my youth. And I really am thankful that you all will give up your time and are so dedicated. But I think that these amendments that you're offering reflect an abrupt and a drastic departure from our established zoning bylaws. They go far beyond the accepted need to provide housing for the service workers. You don't just gut laws that were carefully deliberated over a period of years. And again, here we are between Thanksgiving and Christmas, with many of the stakeholders are not here, who are distracted by the holidays. Why was this time frame chosen to introduce these drastic and far-reaching changes? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and go to the planning board. Planning board members, your comments, thoughts?
Kind of an adversarial process tonight. This is news to me. This is unusual in my experience. Question for the planner. Roger raised some concerns, which have raised some concerns in my mind. Do you feel that the concerns warrant either holding over till January 6th or tabling and redoing this again?
Which concerns? I don't want to misappropriately blanket respond.
Then all I can offer you is what I heard from Roger raised some issues in my mind, that there were substantive edits required, sections that needed to be reviewed carefully to see whether they were appropriate in the zones that they were being applied to. Without going through word by word and line by line as he did, I can't give you specifics, but I was sufficiently concerned by his comments that I would ask you what I'm asking now.
Okay. So there are some general comments. One that stuck out was shoehorning the residential requirements into the commercial district.
Yes.
Other than some changes with regard to number of units per structure and some other related phrasing, this is what the ordinance says now. So if you look at CBD in Wolfeboro Falls, it says what you see in CBD in Wolfeboro Falls, with the exception of number of units per building and things like that. There are some editorial changes, and if the board believes they're substantive, you could hold them over to make sure that the reference little a, little b, point to big A, big B, or big one, big two, and things like that. Those are not, to me, substantive changes, but perhaps they are because of the way they were addressed. So those internal references could be held over so that those changes can be made, and then the board would see and the public would see that conversions are held to the density and parking standards. There are some other omissions about whether or not a second building is allowed or not. I don't agree necessarily that that is precluded or included by the way this language is incorporated. I think something the board needs to keep in mind is that for the most part, these ordinances are currently on the books and how they would be applied with regard to density in all of the respective zones that are listed here. So I know people hear the term multifamily and all of a sudden people picture large apartment buildings, tract houses, whatever it is that conjures in people's minds. When you look at the Central Business District and the Wolfeboro Falls District, across both of those districts, for those looking, it's the red and the orange, you're looking at 6 units per acre. The average lot size is 0.35 acres. So units per acre is simply how large is the lot, multiply that by the density, and that equals a number. So if it's 6 units per acre and it's a half-acre lot, that's 3 units. It's not 30 units, it's not 40 units. So to the water sewer study, I would suggest, yes, the planning board has been waiting for the results of the survey. However, the regulations currently allow the density that the planning board is doing. No one is changing the density. I think it's unfortunate that for years until this recent study, the town has not undertaken an analysis of the water and sewer capacity, which has led to the need for the current study. That's being corrected. But this language and these densities have been on the books since they were originally adopted. So that's what I think the board needs to consider when you consider to move forward, hold over, or table.
Okay, thank you, Tavis. Board members, I mean, we could continue this until January 2nd, take a look at it, have an opportunity to review.
Everything on tonight's has already been noticed for the 20th, if you want to have the revisions available for the 20th.
Well, I think we may need more time, but maybe not.
It depends on what the board's asking for.
So far, what we have seen are a fairly minor change to the deletion of C2 to indicate where that land is now supposed to land. And tonight, editing changes necessary to the multifamily, which can be done quickly also. I don't see why we couldn't put it on the 20th.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Go ahead, Doug.
My only concern about the 20th is one of the points raised earlier is the availability of the public to be here and comment during the holiday period so close to when people will be away.
Would have been nice in our defense if the public had been here as we were debating these since March of this year.
Other thoughts? You want to continue it until, I mean, it just seems like...
I don't know if January 2nd is much more palatable to the holiday public.
If it's what?
Much more palatable to the holiday public.
I'd be happy to make a motion that we hold over the multifamily amendment so that the changes necessary can be done by the planner and bring it back to the table for the 20th.
Okay, does anybody want to second that? Okay, no one's...
Seconding?
No.
I can second that. I think that everybody that's really interested can get a hold of the new edits and make their opinions known by the 20th, if they're really interested. I second that.
It's more rewriting of some of the things. It just seemed to me that a little more time would be helpful. Okay, so you're seconded? Okay. Motion has been made and seconded to hold this over until, what's the the December
20th.
20th, okay, until December 20th. And then this will continue this public hearing until December 20th. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? I'm not in favor. Okay. Okay, so that's 5-2, I guess. Okay. All right, so this will be held over until the 20th. Okay. All right, very good. So we'll have some revisions to the multifamily available for public hearing on 12/20. Okay, all right, moving right along here. The next item, 175-57-1, accessory dwelling unit, amending language to permit ADUs by right and those permitted by conditional use permit. Okay, this was first adopted in 2017 to comply with recently adopted RSA state statute. We had a public meeting on August 16th, 2022, to review comments about what we were proposing. Received some positive and negative comments. The planning board feels as if we've addressed some of these issues, but I think people need to keep in mind that all we're trying to do is give people some options to make housing a little more accessible here in Wolfeboro. So anyway, go ahead, Tavis.
So one thing just to start this fun ball rolling here. For clarity, all accessory dwelling units in this proposed language must adhere to the same rules the town has already adopted. The substantive change of this is to allow the attached or within accessory dwelling units to be issued simply with a building permit. They would still have to comply with all the accessory dwelling unit conditions that are listed here. The other proposal, currently those are allowed by conditional use permit. The planning board is looking to allowing those going to just a building permit, but still requiring the conditions. Current proposal is to change that to a conditional use permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit. As we heard, those will not be permitted in the Shorefront residential district. One thing I want to point out in the proposed language, 175-57.1, paragraph D, refers to planning board waivers. The section reference, not as written, but should read, and almost the last sentence, as part of the review consistent with section 173-35. 173-35 are the site plan review waivers. That allows the planning board to grant waivers in the same manner they grant waivers for site plan review, and it would utilize the same waiver request form. So it currently reads 175-30, it needs to read 173-35. Not a substantive change, just pointing to the correct area.
Okay, and also I need to make note of a letter the planning board received from Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition. They're writing in support of the proposed amendments to the multifamily dwelling, inclusionary, and accessory dwelling units. So just wanted to make note of that we've received that. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on the ADUs, accessory dwelling units.
Page 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, right. Thank you. Page 2, 3, and 4. Oh, okay. Anybody want to speak to this issue? Okay, go ahead, Suzanne. Yeah, sorry.
I'd like to know what data you may have on how many exist as to the detached in the community? Did you go to the assessing records and find out if they have anything? And then also from the overview of looking into this, did you anticipate how many could be expected to be used as accessory? The detached, I'm speaking of detached right now. Have you any data on that?
Well, as detached ADUs aren't currently permitted, there are no detached ADUs in Wolfeboro. As to how many, that's based on...
Currently, how many chicken coops, gazebos, barns, whatever, how many?
None are permitted.
Pardon?
None are permitted. That's a different story. None are permitted.
Okay, so what you're saying is new construction? Detached new construction?
And conversion.
Accessory?
And conversion.
And conversion.
And this ordinance would allow new construction and conversion of existing structures.
And have we any idea what the effect of that will be?
In what regard?
As how many could be converted?
Well,
I mean, what I'm hearing is how many sheds, garages, outhouses, chicken houses, chicken coops, sheds are in Wolfeboro. I don't think anyone has a numerical number for the number of detached structures in town.
So then,
more impossible to count is the number of potential lots that could qualify under the parameter.
so then your answer leads me to believe that it would be new construction, detached would be primarily what we'd be looking at.
I think each lot has to be individually analyzed to see whether it's possible or not.
Well, I'm sorry.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you that in 2017, when the RSA was adopted, that we could have proposed this, and the planning board said, no, let's not do it right now. I mean, I'm sure you remember that.
Yes, I do.
And so now we're doing it.
And I do remember bringing up the topic about conversion of existing structures, detached existing structures as a possibility, but not town-wide. And the other part of that is it really isn't needed if you adjust your existing ordinance, that the part that says it has to be a common wall to have an accessory building, a dwelling within a building. If you would allow breezeways or other types of attachments to allow for accessory, you wouldn't need to add detached as a new option.
If it's not attached, it is detached. So you have to create detached.
No, I'm saying detached would not have to be, you would not have to offer detached accessory units if you would amend the existing ordinance to allow it to be more conducive to people to convert to accessory within their property.
So we wouldn't
But
have
by
to
having
change
it
the ordinance to
connected.
say detached if we already allowed detached. That's a correct statement.
No, by having it attached by way of a breezeway, is that that's what you're proposing, right? Oh, no, I was just trying to clarify what you just said.
I think what Suzanne was trying to say was what she said last time. If we gave people more options to attach a accessory dwelling unit to their existing house through a breezeway or a hallway instead of a interior wall or door, we might get them to attach and not have to go too far. They can connect it by breezeway, but since they have to have it right up next to it with an interior wall, it discourages people to have that done, and they'd like more leeway.
Okay, thanks, John. Oh, okay, thank you, Suzanne. Ken, are you coming up?
We're on page 2, correct?
Yeah, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. And am I correct, the word detached is only used at the middle of page 3, number 3 above F?
So on page 2, starting with paragraph D,
It refers to detached?
Yeah, yes, the
Yeah.
conditional.
Paragraph D said the planning board is hereby authorized to grant a conditional use permit following procedures of Article 31 to allow for detached accessory dwelling units in according with, and on from there.
so it starts
Okay.
there.
All right. How is the question going to read on the ballot? Is it going to have the word detached there?
Yeah, can you
Is the
speak to that,
bold- Is
Tavis?
the bold print the question that's going to be on the ballot?
The bold print is the question, yes.
And no place there do I see the word detached.
Correct.
And I think the voters need to see that. And that's one of the concerns that Roger raised and other people have raised, that there needs to be more explanation in English so we know what we're voting for.
Understood. The article,
Yeah.
article phrasing can be modified, yeah. That's not subject to the public hearing.
Pardon me?
It is subject to the public hearing in that we listen to the public.
Correct.
And so clearly, we need to.
But the
Make this
public
more-
hearing is on the language
Understood,
changes.
understood,
Yes.
but.
The construction of the article phrasing can be dealt with also.
Ken's point is well taken. That will be dealt with.
Right. I've been a voter in Wolfeboro for 53 years. And I've always looked to see, does the planning board support this by a majority vote? And then I'd vote yes. This is the first time I've felt that I don't have that kind of direction and confidence. So anything you can do to explain the article in simple language on the ballot, I think will help people make the decision.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ken. Roger?
At the August 16th public forum, Jerome Holden mentioned that he might like to put an accessory dwelling unit on his property on Grove Street. And in thinking about it, that seemed reasonable. But I think if we're going to look at detached accessory dwelling units, we should look at placing them in a limited area to see, do they work? Do they accomplish what you're trying to accomplish? Because it's always easier to expand, but if there's a problem or some issue, it's very, very difficult to roll it back. And this proposal allows detached ADUs everywhere but in the Shorefront residence district. Basically, this doubles the number of single-family dwellings on a lot. Where there's now one house, there are going to be two houses. Where there is one family, there are going to be two families with everything that families bring with them. I mean, the impact of a detached ADU is considerably greater than the impact of an ADU that is within or attached to a single-family dwelling, which is like an in-law apartment or a place for elderly parents to live and is currently allowed by the zoning ordinance. Now, this does not permit detached ADUs in the Shorefront residential district, but it actually permits something worse. By allowing attachment by conditioned space, it means essentially you can have a freestanding ADU some distance away from the single-family dwelling that's attached by a walkway, a tunnel, or if you don't like the size limitation on an ADU, you can attach it by a room and have a nice big room and know that's part of the main house until you get your certificate of occupancy, and then it belongs to the ADU. I see no benefit in allowing attachment by conditioned space. It just is an invitation to mischief, and it means that basically you're going to have a freestanding ADU in the Shorefront residence district. Now, we're concerned about water quality, protecting our natural resources. You're going to get more impervious surface, more soil disturbance, more stormwater runoff. So I would hope that you would delete that and it be within attached, and if you're going to have detached, then have detached, but don't have them attached by conditioned space. At one meeting, there was a suggestion that somehow they're already permitted because of a definition in the building codes. Well, the definition of a dwelling in a building code has no relevance to a dwelling in the zoning ordinance. That's defined by the definition in the zoning ordinance. This proposal eliminates the requirement that an attached or within ADU obtain a conditional use permit. That means there's no review of the suitability of the site, whether there's adequate usable space, adequate access, absent environmental constraints, the immediate neighborhood impact, and whether there's any undue nuisance or hazard to pedestrian or vehicular traffic by access ways or off-street parking. Section D sets forth requirements that are intended to limit the impact of detached ADUs, but the planning board is granted authority to waive all of those. When I looked at this, I knew there was a typo on 17530, and I did look at the site review regulations, but I didn't get to 17535, so I don't know what the conditions are. But basically, it means there are no requirements. No, so I would request that there be a limited area for detached ADUs so we can see, do they work? Do they accomplish what you are hoping for? And I would also eliminate the words attached by conditioned space in section C. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Rich Massey, 74 Moose Point Road. First of all, I want to endorse what Roger just said. But secondly, I want to address something that's more implied than actually on the paper we're looking at. When I think of accessory dwelling units, especially in the way they're currently available in town, I think of in-law apartments, an extra room for somebody's mother-in-law or something like that. But the expansion that's provided for in these proposed regulations goes well beyond that. I think we all understand the desirability of having dwelling units in Wolfeboro, not simply as year-round residences, but as places to come and enjoy what is largely a resort destination. And I think we can all understand the temptation that there would be to install accessory dwelling units, particularly detached ones, and make use of them basically as rental units. Now, I understand fully clearly that the document says that that's not allowed. But I guess the question in my mind is whether, given the scope, the scale of the changes that are being proposed, as Roger pointed out, the number of units that this opens up, I guess my question is whether there is a credible possibility that the town would in fact be able to enforce those kinds of limitations. Requirements that at least one of the units be occupied by the owner. The requirements that rentals or that in habitation must go on for at least a month. who's going to do that checking? Are we going to increase the number of people in the planning department or the building department to do that kind of checking? My guess is probably not. And so while it may seem from the conversation we're having tonight that the discussion come when this shows up on the town warrant, the implication of the discussion tonight is it's going to be about the words that are on here. But I think the board has to recognize that the discussion may be quite different than that. And I think the discussion will be, at least to some very large extent, whether the town has the credibility when it maintains that it will enforce the very detailed limitations that this regulation calls for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tavis, do you want to speak to the enforcement issue?
The only way I can respond to that is the town enforcement has to respond to every regulation that's on the books. There are regulations on how long temporary signs are installed. There are regulations on what you can have in your garage and not do in your garage right now. So to me, enforcement of these regulations is no different than enforcing setbacks or enforcing shoreland regulations or any of the other very detailed regulations that are on the books right now. What it requires is someone to complain or someone to say, I believe there's a violation of the regulations. That is the heart of all the enforcement, whether it's accessory dwelling units, detached accessory dwelling units. I think somebody has different renters in there and it hasn't been a month, please investigate. There are several people in this room that I would call frequent flyers without offense who say, I think something's wrong here, I think something's wrong there, and the town is diligently able to follow those. What I can't promise is immediate and swift resolution to alleged zoning violations because the zoning enforcement process is not swift and direct. It does not result in helicopters or lights and sirens.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Ken?
One last point, but again, I'm Ken Perry, and I'm one of the frequent flyers he just referred to. And the two primary cases I've brought to them over the last 2 or 3 years, I'm still waiting for them to be dealt with on Center Street, on one of our gateways. So we're not enforcing what we have. Page 2, letter D, the planning board is further authorized to grant waivers of the requirements of this paragraph. As an example, near the end of paragraph D, in the middle of page 3, number 2 says, parcels shall meet the minimum lot sizing of the underlying zoning district with respect to single-family lot size, acreage, and frontage. Is the planning board going to give a waiver if a 2-acre lot is required and it's only 1.9? And if so, isn't that an issue for the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, rather than the planning board?
Well, the planning board can grant waivers for site plan review and subdivision.
Right. And usually it's over documentation, an issue with a survey or something like that.
So to answer
something as significant as a lot not meeting the current zoning size, to me, is permanent, long-lasting, and unfixable after it's approved. And it should go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Okay, if it doesn't meet the present regulations for setback, coverage, and things of that nature,
Well,
they would go for a variance.
But that isn't what it says here. It says the planning board.
You're correct in the reading. The planning board would have the ability to grant a waiver.
Right.
The question you asked was, would the planning board absent any other detail, approve a 1.9 where 2 was the requirement. They can't answer that question because you're only looking at that one element. But that is the type of thing that they would have the authority to review, yes.
But am I misunderstanding, having been to several planning board hearings where Jim Rhines asked for a waiver? That's more of a paperwork issue, and has he presented the other information? But when you give a waiver on because a lot doesn't meet the requirements of the ordinance calls, to me, that's where the zoning board of adjustment should come in.
Okay.
And I'd like to see that wording adjusted.
Correct.
Okay.
To that point, that's specifically why the board put in the waiver provision, was for that sort of. Oh, I understand. Correct.
I don't want to, I'm Gordon Lang again. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but these are basically the two issues which I was concerned about in this particular part. I feel like we're bypassing the ZBA with item D here. Like we're finding a way to exclude them from a way of dealing with any complaint here. And I'd feel much more comfortable if they were written back in some way so that we recognized that the planning board isn't basically bypassing them in this particular process just with their ability to grant waivers. And we've already addressed the enforcement part.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Just one last question. I'm looking at the statute that talks about the purpose of these ADUs, and it talks about is to increase the supply and diversity of housing without the need for more infrastructure or further land development, providing flexible housing options for residents and their families, providing elderly citizens with the opportunity to retain their homes and age in place. That's great. I don't think anybody would complain about helping family. But from what I'm hearing tonight is that all the barns, all the garages, all the chicken coops that have upstairs with bathrooms and showers, they're not considered ADUs. That's what I'm hearing. But nobody will say what they are.
There's something that seemed to have existed prior to zoning, I think, some of them.
No. I can point to ones that were built in the last 3 years.
Okay, all right.
And they have showers and bedrooms and.
Okay, then you should.
Okay.
Okay, but then it would be good
But
if
that's
you.
okay, as long, if it's for family or grandma, whatever, I'm not contesting that. I think that's fine. I think family should help family.
Yeah.
However, what I wanted to know is who is watching that they're not Airbnbs? Is anybody leasing that?
Well, it's
Currently,
in
there are no regulations on short-term rentals. This language is written to prevent short-term rental, and a later article deals with the definition of short-term rental specifically.
Right,
So that
and
would be regulated.
And it says in the statute that the owner has to live there
Correct.
and that no one can stay in the ADU for less than 30 days.
Right.
No, what it says is the owner has to live in one of the units. It doesn't dictate which of the units, but the owner has to not only be an owner of the property, this is saying it has to be their principal place of residence.
And since we have no law in town, they can rent the barn.
Currently, there's no prohibition on short-term rental. One of the warrant articles coming up will define short-term rental as a use. That use is not permitted in any zone. Therefore, if the definition is adopted as proposed, short-term rental would not be permitted.
Okay. And that's why when I asked about ADUs at the beginning of the evening, everyone said there are no ADUs in town.
No.
Okay.
We'd say there were no legal detached ADUs.
There's no ADUs. Okay. And the last question I have is you said in the beginning of the evening that New Hampshire mandates that Wolfeboro have ADUs.
All New Hampshire towns.
Okay. All
right.
New Hampshire towns. That's fine. Do they mandate that they be attached or detached?
No.
Can Wolfeboro tweak that mandate?
You cannot tweak the state statute that says any lot that can be developed with a single-family home can have an accessory dwelling unit.
But Wolfeboro or any other town can't specify that they will allow attached, but not detached?
That's
Yes.
exactly what was adopted in
And that's what-
2017.
That's what we did in 2017.
Okay.
Other than paragraph D on page 2 into 3 is already on the books. The only difference is a conditional use permit is required to have the attached right now.
Okay. And you won't say whether the owner can rent the ADU?
You can rent the ADU, but you can't rent it for less than a month
If this is
if this is adopted.
Yeah, if this is.
Or the definition of short-term rental is adopted.
Could I say something
yeah,
to that,
yeah,
lady?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure, go ahead.
So what we've been told is the state mandated an ADU concept. We adopted the attached ADU concept. The detached ADU concept was not mandated, but was
An option.
an option. So don't go out of here being with the mindset that they are a state requirement to be detached. They're a state requirement to be attached. We don't have to adopt the detached, and that's why we're here tonight in front of you, to whether or not you folks want to
Yeah.
adopt that.
Right. Yeah. It's already on the books that you can have the attached. It's there now. It's just the detached that we're talking about.
I think we need the microphone. If
Yeah.
you're speaking.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, anyone else? Thank you, John, for doing that.
Sorry. So, John, you're saying we meet the state law if we just leave our ordinance the way it is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Right, that's what we've said, yes. Okay, all right.
But to follow up on that, the planning board has only seen 6 applications since 2017. The reason the planning board is considering allowing the detached or proposing language to allow the detached is because there have not been many ADUs in town. Perhaps it's because of the prohibition on detached, therefore the proposal to allow by conditional use permit detached.
Okay.
It goes back to, thank you, John, for clarifying that. It goes back to keeping the amendment, keeping the zoning ordinance that you have, and under F3, where it says, when an ADU is within single-family home, shall be connected to the main dwelling unit by an interior door in a common wall. You delete that last line, and you will see more than 16 applicants. Make it easier for them to convert. You build it, they will come.
That's right.
And I just want to make one
Where does
point.
F3 say that?
It's not there. One point, though, also, just think about what the other lady said. She knows of barns where upstairs is fully ready to go in an apartment with bathrooms and its family, which is great.
Does it have a permit?
Didn't get a permit. Is it up to code? What's the life safety stuff like? That is my concern, that if we do make this so that you do have detached dwellings, people are going to be forced to actually have to follow code. So we're not going to have problems with, gee, the barn burned down because it wasn't up to code because somebody didn't know what they were doing. They put the electricity in. This will stop some of those problems and tip some of the other problems over when somebody wants to make an adjustment or, gee, they want to do something different to that upstairs barn with a new person that just bought the property. And it clicks over to, oh, that wasn't permitted. Oh, do you realize none of this is up to code? Now you can't use it at all. So that would eliminate a lot of those problems and bring everybody into a little bit safer mode, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Any other member of the public? Okay, then I'll close this public hearing. And planning board members, what are your thoughts?
The objections we heard tonight, the objections that we heard on August 16th, I'm almost on top of this stupid thing. I'll try. How's this?
Quiet tonight.
The objections that we heard tonight are essentially the same objections that we heard on August 16th, and they boil down, in my opinion, essentially to this. If we allow this ordinance, then all of a sudden there are going to be 2 dwellings on every single lot in the town, period, except in the Shorefront residential district. Because we're now allowing people to build another house, call it a detached ADU, and although they can't use it as a short-term rental, they could use it for 31 or 32 or 35 days, or they could rent it out. But we're going to see these things springing up like mushrooms. And that's the real danger. And oh my God, we're going to have impacts on sewer systems, impacts on the water, and on and on. So I took it on myself to make some phone calls. I called around to a number of the planners in the state to see what their experiences were with accessory dwelling units. Do they have them attached or detached? And what are their experiences with either attached or detached? You know what our experience is. 5 years ago, we put an ordinance in allowing attached ADUs, and we got 6 applications. The idea, the reason why we put that ordinance in was to find some way of increasing housing without building gigantic apartment buildings or doing some other injustice to the land. No one's taken up on them. They're simply not very popular. So we looked around and we said, what else could we do? And other towns around the lake, as well as in the state, have used detached ADUs as an opportunity for families to stay together and for older folk to rent out a detached ADU to a family and bring in an income stream which they could then supplement their social and stay on their land, stay in their family home. So I called around, make a long story short, and I'll just give you the comments that I received from the planner of Manchester, the planner of Milford. They haven't sprung up like mushrooms, quote unquote. Pittsfield, we've had a few. Amherst, since 2019, we've only permitted 3. Merrimack, since 2017, they have permitted 5. They've permitted 5 in Merrimack since 2017. In Meredith, our sister city and our major competitor for tourism dollars around the lake, since 2019, 2 detached, 1 detached in 2020, that's 3. 2 detached in 2021, that's 5. 2 detached in 2022, that's 7. So they've had 7 detached ADUs in about the same length of time that we've had our 6 attached ADUs. Nashua, they don't even have accessory dwelling units detached whatsoever. The impact of a detached ADU on a town around the lake is minimal. By experience with other planners, when you call and ask them, what have they permitted? They've permitted about as many detached as we have attached, and we've only permitted 6 in 5 years. So we're not going to see a second house springing up on every single lot in town the way we have been warned is likely to happen, because unless the experience of Wolfeboro is so unique that it's different from every other town that's reporting statistics. That's number 1. Number 2, I also wondered about the actual building process of a detached ADU. what's involved, it's essentially building another home. So I asked myself, is that likely? How many people can afford to build a second home on their lot? Some of us are struggling to keep our first home going. People in Rochester, people in Lyme, they would love to be able, one person in Rochester writes that she bought a lot, moved up here, bought a lot, it had a detached structure. She wanted to turn it into an ADU. She found that with the Rochester regulations, the need to hook up to their water system and fulfill all the other regulations was going to cost her $30K. She couldn't afford it, so she didn't do it. Which brought to my mind, it costs money to build a detached ADU. It's cheaper to do an attached ADU. It's much more expensive to do a detached. So when we worry about where are these going to start showing up, and are we going to get inundated with them, and is our character of our town going to change from rural to some kind of magic industrial area all of a sudden because this ordinance passes? The experience of other planners shows that it does not. And more importantly, the practicalities involved in building an ADU are going to make it prohibitive for a lot of folk in town. So I can't put much weight to the concerns it's going to change the character of the town and that every single lot in town is going to now have 2 dwellings because other people haven't found that. And that's the evidence that you were asking for, Suzanne. It just doesn't have that kind of an impact in the towns around the state.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, one additional comment. Again, the proposal to allow attached in addition to, to allow detached in addition to attached does not increase the potential for the number of units in town. Currently, we can have attached, so every house that has the space and the septic capacity could currently have an attached. Making them, allowing detached does not increase that potential.
Did I close the public hearing?
Yes.
Yeah. I sort of thought I closed the public hearing. But okay, all right. Go ahead. I'll reopen the public hearing.
Thank you for that overview analysis, Michael. You've made my argument for me. So, if it does not resolve the problem or the goal, which is under purpose, to increase the supply and diversity of housing, then why do it?
Because it's giving people another option.
Yeah, simply another option, Suzanne.
That's really the only thought that came to our mind.
I mean, everybody in town recognizes that we have a housing problem for our older folk and for our workforce housing, and everyone recognizes that we got to do something about it long term. And the folk who take care of us at Genesis can't afford to live here in town. That's not really a good thing. So we're trying to find alternatives. The first one we tried was an attached ADU, and we got 6 people to take it. So if we try detached ADU and we get another 6 people to take it, we've gotten 12 families. It's more than we had in 2017. So to me, that's a win.
Okay, Ann?
I had a brief comment. I appreciate I agree with Suzanne. Why? I think a lot of people are still asking why. Thank you for your analysis. But you guys are a planning board, not a right now, let's fix it. We've got people who are building something right now. Can't we absorb that? See how the sewer, see how it affects water quality. Kathy Eaton stood up here and told everybody how bad the traffic was, that it was just the worst she'd ever seen. What are we doing? I don't know. So maybe people don't do the ADUs right away. But you're a planning board. 20 years from now, what's Wolfeboro going to look like? It's on you.
Thank you.
That's exactly why we're doing what we're doing, because we are a planning board, Ann. We're planning for the future.
Okay, can I close the public hearing again? Oh, okay.
Mary Schillereff, I'm not a frequent flyer. I don't intend to become one. But my concern is the folks from outsiders are looking at Wolfeboro as a place to dump their money. So they're going to buy these little places. And, you know, if I were a senior citizen and somebody offered me, actually, I am a senior citizen, but if I were offered a ton of money, I'd probably leave. And somebody's going to come in and tear down my house and build all kind of stuff. And, I mean, who are we? I just worry. What I see in Wolfeboro is this, especially the north side, this expansion, people with a lot of money, not just regular folks. And if I worked at Genesis, I wouldn't live in Wolfeboro, quite honestly. There are towns outside of Wolfeboro that offer way more facilities for a family. And I appreciate everything everybody's doing, but I worry about Wolfeboro being a place where folks come because they've got money, they live somewhere else, and that's where they're going to buy this stuff, tear it down. And even on the lake shore, I'm thinking, because we are on the lake, so we have the highest taxes, and we can't add a building to support our property. I don't want to do that. But you see what I mean? You're allowing everyone else to add detached, unattached, breezeways, whatever, but we eventually are going to have to sell our property because we can't afford the taxes. So there are like 5 things I just said.
Okay.
So just as another option of thinking is if you can't afford your property and you'd like to stay, perhaps there's a way you could build a 2-bedroom, small structure, not attached to yours, near yours, live in that, rent the house, or live in the house and rent that. That means you could stay. And you become the person who's in charge of whatever's going on in the other house because you live there.
We've certainly looked through all that. We don't want that. We don't want to have to do that.
That was just a hypothetical.
Yeah. We don't want to have to do that. Hands are being forced. And what I see happening in Wolfeboro is folks from who knows where coming in, and I think it's been rather historic, quite frankly, and buying up property and squeezing people out. Whether that settles the housing project, and I agree totally with what's happening, Harriman Hill, do I have the name right? As well as whatever studies are in process. I'm a retired teacher. We couldn't do anything without a boatload of studies and to wait for that information to come in. I don't want to add any more shorefront property. What I see happening on the shorefront is people are going up or back.
That's actually not an issue that's on the table here. That will happen. All the rules still apply. It's a percentage of footprint. You have to respect wetland setbacks, side lot setbacks. You have to have appropriate permitted sewer.
I get all that. I get all that. But where it's happening is people with a lot of money are coming into Wolfeboro and using this gentle place. We have things in Harriman Hill. I'd never even been in there. I'd never even driven back until I heard about it. It's a great place. That's where I might live. There's family and there's kids. Why aren't we waiting for that? And then the Pine Hill Road that becomes something else, that property that's going in. I don't get the urgency.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I close the public hearing now? Okay. Back to the planning board. Well, if...
There's no further discussion.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, if you want to make a motion, that would be fine.
All right, sure. I'll be happy to move that the planning board adopt the amended language in 175-57.1 for accessory dwelling units as presented with a single edit of the 175-30 to 173.
And adding detached to the ordinance requirements for the deliberative session?
As written.
We don't need a motion for that. That's
okay. I just wanted to
outside of this.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It is understood by the planner that the word detached will appear.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to clarify it to everyone, that's all. Okay, motion has been made
Seconded.
and seconded. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And one abstention, okay. All right, very good. On to H, 175-28. To amend the inclusionary zoning. This is found on pages 4, 5, 6, and 7. This was first discussed by the Planning Board in 2009. This ordinance was to encourage the development of more affordable housing. Since then, the ordinance has not been used. This proposal is to rewrite the ordinance to clarify some of the provision and make it a little more useful for folks. Again, we are trying to address the need to provide some affordable living units. And Tavis, if you go through this and explain how, you know, how many units this would provide in a regular subdivision or apartment, okay? Complex.
Yes. As many are probably aware, there is already an inclusionary zoning section of the zoning ordinance. The existing language is very tailored to affordable units, market rate units, owner-occupied rentals, owner-occupied ownership. So what the planning board functionally did in this case is to break it right down so that the inclusionary ordinance would apply to manufactured housing communities, elderly housing communities, conservation subdivisions, traditional subdivisions, workforce housing communities, or multifamily housing projects. Part of this is done because the statute has recently changed at the state level, where any density bonus, if you will, that's allowed for elderly housing also has to be made available for affordable and workforce housing. So in fact, Wolfeboro was given effectively a nod from the NHMA presentation on this by simply modifying the inclusionary to include all of these housing groups, as I've identified. One of the changes is, again, if you look at the proposed language, it removes all of the definition section that's in the existing section with exception of affordable housing and yield plan, which the board has already moved under a separate discussion this evening. All of this language has been reviewed and vetted by town council for its references, cross-references, and other. So if there's, you should be sound in that regard. One of the things I've heard sort of tangential questions on is this not in fact increasing the density with affordable housing? And the answer is functionally yes, but effectively no. And I say that because in order to have inclusionary housing with this proposed language, at least 15% of the units have to be inclusionary. So you have to have at least 4 units in a project in order to have 15%. Simply taking 4 times 0.15 equals, and that rounds to 1 unit. This is 0.62, so it rounds to 1 unit. So you're already limited on the properties that can take part in this, because as we discussed earlier with the multifamily section that's been tabled, you're only looking at 2 units per acre in the vast majority of town. In 2 zoning districts, you're allowed 6 units per acre, but the lots are so small, when you multiply it by density, you're not going to achieve 4 units. So this seems like a drastic increase in density, perhaps, until you look at the parcel sizes in Wolfeboro. It's also requiring either connection to town water and sewer, or a community well and septic system, or some combination thereof. There might be some properties that have town water access, but not town sewer access. These densities are already allowed in the current ordinance. The one exception that comes up is the planning board's ability to allow up to a 30% increase in density, which again, 30% sounds like a scary number until you look at the average lot sizes in Wolfeboro and realize that a 30% increase might be 3 units for a 10-unit project. Again, you have to look at the yield plan. You have to start in with your base piece of property. Just because you have 10 acres and are allowed 2 units per acre does not mean across the board you start at 20 and then apply the 30%. You have to take out the setbacks, the wetlands, the steep slopes, the access, how much buildable area is there? How much buildable area in acreage is then what is used to determine the base density. Then it requires a developer to put at least 15% into a workforce or affordable unit. That has been quite a hurdle for anyone speaking to me in my tenure here or my predecessors here, because as Kathy mentioned, no one has used the inclusionary zoning section because it frankly requires a very philanthropic developer to include workforce and otherwise. That's why the incentive is there.
Okay, so you're saying that the yield plan, that you have to remove the steep slopes and wetlands in order to come up with your 2 acres or 2 units?
You have to remove all the land you can't build on anyway. So whether it's steep slopes, wetlands, setbacks, all of those have to come out.
And that's the way it would be enforced?
Correct.
Not setbacks.
You can't build in the setbacks.
No, I know, but you can still get the number of units inside setbacks, front setbacks.
That's the way it hasn't been enforced that way.
That area, that land area is subtracted?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open the public hearing on the inclusionary zoning. Suzanne, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Where to begin with this one? This one's a big one. It's as big as the multifamily one. I understand the goal. I'd like to see more Harriman Hills myself. And I'm not opposed to affordable housing. But the big problem I see with this is it's allowed in the entire town. All zones, everywhere, bottom of page 4. Applicable for all projects and all zoning districts, including when you go to your backlot ordinance, it's included in backlots, lots with no street frontage. They have to go through that no street frontage process, so the whole town, including the agricultural district and all the way up and through the town, backlands, forest, farmland, if they can meet the requirements for lot sizes and density and so forth, you can cite one of these projects there. Single-family, duplex, multifamily, irrespective of permitted uses of the underlying zoning district, provided that density requirements of underlying are met. So, I guess I'll just start picking on you folks. I'm going to give you copies of these maps. One is future land use that the town paid good money for to do our master plan. We did a future study. And we have community facilities and infrastructure. And on that page is your water and sewer lines. I've not seen any maps brought out through this process. Nobody's gathered around a map and said, well, how would it go over here, or would it fit over there, or the land requirements. You got all your steep slopes taken out, but they can find an area large enough, then something could happen there. But anyway, so I want to give you these maps. Future land use worksheet. That's where you should have started, with that map. That's what the master plan put together as a tool for future land use planning. And then you synchronize it with community facilities. So, if you would pass those along that way, and if you And one thing else in here that really, really concerned me, 17531, affordable housing categories and initiatives. I don't know how you determine your percentages, but that can wait. The one that bothered me the most, a density bonus of 30% yield plan density is permitted where municipal sewer and water are available. Are you kidding me?
Say that again?
Yeah. Are you kidding me? 30% bonus, density bonus, where water and sewer is allowed? With what you just heard Linda say? That's not right. So I'm going to read my closing remarks. And you may hear me say something about backlots, but it will be little. The only zoning changes that should survive after these public comments tonight are Article 4, boathouses. The Planning Board on 1/18/22 received a memo from David Ford regarding water and sewer concerns and study to follow late summer, early fall. This board and the planner, with the exception of Thurston and Breskin, forged ahead with these proposals regardless. There's 180 units sitting in the wings, ready to come before you for site visit. It is not a crisis to put this off a year until the engineer's report and analysis and study has been done on all these ordinances that are proposed. What may very well be a crisis is the sewer disposal system from the old pipes, the old lines, the pump stations, the plant replacement, the spray fields closure or resting, and the uncertain RIB. That means the new system that was put in, the success of that. As capital improvement members, and you, Tavis, Kathy and Michael, you should have known or know that, I'm going to read some of these, that, oh shoot, oh darn, what did I do with it? I may come across it. Oh, here it is. That 2022, these are the numbers that we're using in the capital improvements program. Water, $3,639,000. Sewer, $13,800,000. 2023, $12 million. Total all CIP, not including sewer and water, not including sewer, is $61 million. Currently, we're carrying a debt of $3 million for water and sewer, or sewer. The plant, $10 million is a major rehab sewer treatment and plant. That's planned. That's in the known department. Pump stations, currently 9 pump stations, 7 small ones needed, urgent, upgrade at $85,000 each, budgeted $340,000 for Elm, Crescent, Sewell, and Clark Roads. Lines, current. The 1940s lines, I've got an estimate here of one that's proposed right here in, I believe it's Main Street, 1,400 feet replacement at $1,500,000. That's just one small section here. At today's figures per David Ford, Both water and sewer, hear this number, public, $1 million per year for 100 years is the cost to bring everything up to where it should be. So I guess you think it's smart planning to add population and housing to it. You forged ahead and proposed incentives for increased density growth town-wide, as well as knowing the facts about the water and sewer. During this year, the board has had approximately 16 meetings, of which most were preceded with a public hearing for an applicant. Mid-year, drafts started coming, and attorneys were copied. And might I add, I've heard twice tonight the town planner said, well, the attorney has looked it over and it meets the requirements. Just because it can be done legally doesn't mean it should be done. At an August public hearing input session was called, 11 people spoke per the minutes. 5 were opposed to your proposals, 1 yes, 3 undecided. No meeting with discussion of these sweeping changes. Was there any new data or any analysis done for potential impact to water, sewer, schools, fire, police, traffic, electric, all infrastructure? This town planner used an outdated build-out plan that was done approximately in 2003 and only for the area of water and sewer, not an impact study to the town as a whole. Planner Hausman, not by accident, brought forward the plan that is in place today, approximately in between 1998 and 2000, or 2003, I guess it was, with a build-out analysis for the areas then proposed. It was the arc that you see on the map that increased lot sizes going out from within the core of town. It has worked well, served the town well. The proposals are a sweeping change to forever, if passed, change the neighborhood zoning and district as we know it forever. You cannot undo land that has changed and built up. So, what is being proposed by all the residential changes with no input building put-out analysis from potential impact to our infrastructure is beyond irresponsible planning. It is not planning. Sewer is one good reason to stop, plan, think for another year to gather a study. The plant was built about 1974 with a 20-year life. We are about 20 years past due for complete upgrades and replacement, not even taking into consideration the tenuous position of the rapid infiltration system success. It doesn't look great for that. We are operating on a consent agreement from the state. It's not permitted, fully permitted. It's a pilot program operating under the consent of the state. What you are doing is running the risk of overwhelming the entire system and at the least shortening the lives with which we have to, shortening the life with added stress. I am requesting, due to the lack of sewer report and a systematic town infrastructure impact study, you table this year's proposal with the exception of boathouse and apply for the New Hampshire Housing Opportunity Grant. The governor has $100 million in invested New Hampshire initiatives. $5 million has been allocated to provide grants to municipalities to analyze and update their land use regulations to help increase housing developments. The grants are to study zoning, other regulatory causes or lack of affordable housing, identify potential changes to the land use regulations, and/or establish or update the regulations in response to those findings. Community engagement will be an important part of the municipal work under these grants. So I'll hand you out that grant information. I know that towns are jumping on the bandwagon to take advantage of that grant, and I think this town would be very remiss not to have that done.
Okay, and again, you do understand this inclusionary zoning is already in the zoning ordinance. Okay. And
I do, because you're handing it out. I gotta put it in the file.
okay, anybody else want to speak to this issue? Okay, Roger.
When you look at inclusionary zoning, and this really hasn't changed from the current version. Under the purpose, it states new units should be located close to jobs and services. First thing this does is it says this should be in every district, but the shorefront residential and municipal watershed. So it's directly contrary to that. Currently, it's in the village residential, the residential, general residential, and Suzanne alluded to the fact that the zoning as it's been in place has more intensive uses, more closer to the downtown, and less intense uses going out, which, among other things, results in a savings to the taxpayer, and it makes it easier to provide the goods and services where the most people are. It also is in keeping with the express preference of people in every questionnaire since 1980, which says that what they like about Wolfeboro is its small town, rural atmosphere. I think you're proposing basically a general assault on that with these proposals. In addition, the purpose statement says, additionally, in implementing this article, Wolfeboro has considered the region's affordable housing needs as defined in the Lakes Region Planning Commission's housing needs assessment. The board has not done that. That's currently being updated. I think it's going to be ready the end of December, and would certainly be available, if not this year, but for this to be visited next year. And as has been noted, there are 180 units coming down the road through the approval process. And I know we're talking about housing, but housing shortage or lack of affordable housing is not unique to Wolfeboro. It's not unique to New Hampshire. And unless you go to Idaho, maybe, or a few other places, it's the situation throughout the United States. Whether we can attribute that to high in-state college tuition, which makes all our kids go to other states to go to college, I don't know, but it's not going to be an easy fix. This permits multifamily dwellings, and we've already got a problematic multifamily ordinance everywhere in town except for the Shorefront Residence District and the Municipal Watershed District. It eliminates the current protection offered by requiring that inclusionary zoning projects be subject to a special exception from the Board of Adjustment and replaces that with a conditional use permit. Section 17530 authorizes the planning board to grant waivers to application, submittal requirements, and provisions of all provisions of the inclusionary zoning regulations. I've always been a firm believer and have advised planning boards that it's okay to waive procedural requirements, but you should not be waiving substantive requirements. When you do that, it means there are no regulations. It doesn't matter what we vote on because the planning board can go do whatever it feels like. We're allowing multifamily dwellings and increased density everywhere, except as noted, and there are no requirements mandated. There's Zippo. There's not one thing that is mandated in this ordinance that they have to follow. In theory, you can come in here with a piece of graph paper and planning board likes it, you're approved, no problem. And I've been watching the planning board here for 50 years, if you count when I was on the board, and we've had some interesting planning boards over the years with some interesting characters. We had the guy who left town after there was an incident apparently involved his wife, a gun, and a car at the town docks. He was the chairman. So that is not a discretion that I think should be given to the planning board. Section 175.31 addresses the incentives. And as I interpret this, reading it, you take your yield plan, which now is anything you could get approved in the town of Wolfeboro, that's your base. And then you add a 15% increase to the yield plan to get the yield plan density. So and then you go down to a 30% of the yield plan density. So at this point, it would appear to me that you're multiplying 1.15% by 30%. And so actually the density bonus, when you figure all this out, is 34.5%. This is going from the current ordinance, which gives you 15%, to 34.5%. If you're on town water and sewer and approved septic, that's what counts. But if you're elsewhere, the maximum density permitted by this section is whatever you can squeeze onto the site and get approved by the state for water and sewer. We don't know what the limitation is. We don't know what you're granting there, other than the fact that it's going to be controlled probably by soils and slopes and whatever the state comes up with for requirements. Is this the board's understanding of this? Is that how you understand this is going to work? It's 34.5%, and you get a 1.5. Well, you're shaking your head. What have I got wrong here? Can you tell me? Can any of the board members tell me? I'll bet you not one of you guys can tell me what this thing really says. You keep looking at Tavis. Do you know what you're proposing here? The answer is obviously no, you have no clue.
The reason we look at him is that he is the enforcer of the regulations and the planning director.
What it says on page...
That's why we look at him.
What it says on page 5, 175.31. Any project that proposes to include affordable housing as outlined in this chapter of at least 15% of the proposed units is eligible to increase the yield plan by 15%. So as I said at the beginning, if you have 4 units times 0.15 or 15% is 0.62. 0.62 rounds to 1. So therefore, if at least one of the 4 proposed units in the yield plan is affordable or workforce or inclusionary, they would be eligible for a 15% increase. A 15% increase of 4, again, is 1. So you would go to 5 units. If you were to be so bold as to go to 30% and take the base yield density of 4 and give it a 30% increase, i.e. 4 times 0.3, you end up at 1.2 or 1. So 4 units with a 15% or 30% increase becomes 5.
Yeah, but you're just playing with numbers here. I mean, you're picking a low figure. Suppose you've got a big tract of land.
If you had...
The question is...
If you had 10 units, 10 times 0.15 is what? It's 1.5, so that would be 2. With a 30% increase, you would have 13 units. If you had 15%, you would have 12 units. So I'm using little numbers because it's more realistic and it's functional based on the lot sizes of Wolfeboro. If you look again at the majority of areas that are close to water and sewer, i.e. downtown and close to services, the lot sizes are predominantly less than half an acre in size. The number of lots even eligible for this ordinance are probably less than half of the lots in Wolfeboro in the higher density. There are only 214 parcels in the CBD in the Wolfeboro Falls district. The average lot size is 0.35. 0.35 times 2 does not create enough base units to even qualify for a density increase. That's why the board was willing to look at the larger lots that are further away. The board also clearly articulated in its discussion the added cost of having a large number of units on water and septic. So one of the two things jump out. Under 175.30, the paragraph below 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There, again, it's the same misreference that was in the earlier. Needs to change from 175.30 to 173.35. The other one that pops out is in 175.31B. The first sentence should read, a density bonus of 30% of yield plan density may be permitted where. That was the board's intended assurance to make sure that the water and sewer capacity were even available.
Well, okay, yeah, I have a second question, kind of, and that is...
Does that answer your question, Roger?
No.
It does not. You
No,
don't,
my
you don't
question-
understand any better now than you did before?
I have
That's
a
because
chart.
my question was answered.
May I remind you, Roger, at this point, I'm kind of fed up personally with being adversarially addressed by you and other members of the public. And I just remind you, this is a collegial public process where we're all supposed to address ourselves with a certain degree of decorum and collegiality. And that's been severely lacking, particularly in your presentation just now, but in other members of the public's here. I'm not here to be kicked around. I was here to do the best job I could for the town. And what I've heard so far is most people think that I've been sitting on my butt wondering what the heck is going on. And I'm kind of fed up with that.
Well, if
Excuse
you
me,
don't
Madam
feel that you
Chairwoman.
can sit and entertain this, perhaps you should step down. I think your comments have certainly been more adversarial than anybody else's.
I differ with you, Roger, and I'm not going to go any further than that.
Okay,
Tavis,
Roger, would you
can I-
please continue?
Yeah, Tavis, did I explain this correctly? Because one of my comments is that if you want people to use it, they need to be able to understand it. And the way I explained it, is that how it would be calculated, or did I get that wrong?
No, and I have a couple of handouts. I don't have one for everyone that I can make available. And again, these small numbers because people tend to relate to small numbers. So that is easy. But in here it says, an example, where yield plan equals 4 units, and at least 1, i.e. 4 times 0.15 equals 0.6, therefore 1 of the units needs to be inclusionary. Someone would be available for 15 or ultimately 30% increase in density.
Do I get one?
I have some for all board members.
Better get to a microphone, Tavis.
So a couple of things, with or without the sheet in front of you. That is how the math is applied. That is what's written here. Again, 175.31. At least 15% of the base units have to be inclusionary units. That then qualifies you for a 15 or, as outlined in here, a 15 or 30% increase. That's presuming that water and sewer are provided for in one mechanism or another. The board spent quite a bit of time discussing that.
Right.
The other thing to remember is that while it looks like a density bonus, anyone that has come in with projects, and we've heard about what I still consider the ethereal 180 units, is that project started out with the concept of including inclusionary units or workforce units or affordable units. They found it a cost disincentive to put inclusionary units into their project. That's not because the developer wanted to be greedy and have market rate units or whatever you want to call them. They were not able to make the project pencil by including affordable or workforce housing units. It just didn't work. And I questioned multiple developers who had multiple unit projects coming forward. I said, what if the planning board could allow you to double the density? And they said, no, adding more units makes it work less. There is no incentive at the state level or the local level, frankly, and that's one of the reasons this ordinance hasn't been used. It's disadvantageous to developers to provide workforce housing. So the reason the planning board tackled this objective was to try and provide some more incentive. So the inclusionary language that's here is, as has been articulated tonight, functionally what's already in the ordinance, other than broadening it to all zones, which people can differ on and debate. But the planning board is suggesting to open it up to all zones. You have to remember, it's a disincentive for developers to put workforce and inclusionary units in their projects. It doesn't pencil for their project.
Based on your discussions with them, do you think this will work?
No, I still don't think people will do it because it's a disincentive. But what I do want to say is the planning board did not make up the 15% and 30% numbers. The 15% and the 30% is in the model ordinance that was around when the inclusionary ordinance was first adopted by Wolfeboro. That particular section was not. The planning board chose to bring it in to add incentive to the language of the ordinance that hasn't worked since it was originally adopted.
Okay, are you going to continue because it's getting late?
Well, there's one other conflict here, and that is between 175.31 and 175.30. There's 175.31 proposes density bonuses, but when you go up to 175.30, it says, and I'll only read part of it, single-family duplex and multifamily units are all permitted irrespective of the permitted uses of the underlying zoning district, provided that the density requirements of the underlying zoning district are met. So that would prohibit the approving of a project with density bonuses. So I would suggest that given the problems with this and possible complications with the multifamily ordinance, that this be withdrawn. That would give you time to go over the Planning Commission's housing need assessments. I would limit this to the village residential, and general residential. I would keep the present definition of yield plan, but I think, if you're serious about, which I know you are serious about this, I think it's going to take more of a scalpel approach than a more broader approach if you're really going to have success with what you're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If the board is interested, I disagree with that reading of that particular sentence. I read the first one about single-family duplex and multifamily. That is with regard to establishing the base yield density, not with regard to the ultimate density of the project. I think when it comes down to applicability, somebody needs to show a site plan showing that all the sensitive lands, et cetera, have been removed, and then develop a base yield based on that. And based on that yield, if you then apply, you can move on to 175.31 and look at considering density bonuses.
Okay,
Gordon Lang,
go ahead.
I came in here prepared to applaud you for trying to add an incentive for this kind of development, and whether it works or not, it seemed like a good attempt to do that. I have one concern on 175.30, and I don't know why I'm speaking up for the zoning board twice in one night since they've never ruled in my favor. But I'm concerned about the last paragraph there, which again seems to bypass the zoning board, and I like checks and balances in my government, and when I've gone through the planning board and then had to go to the zoning board and still had to go to Superior Court to address something, I've appreciated having all three steps in there. and taking one of those steps out. I don't know if this is state law here or if
Yes.
you're taking boilerplate language here or not, but it would seem that normally the ZBA would be involved in this kind of an appeal, but.
The only decisions that can be appealed to, the only time a planning board action, and I'm paraphrasing legalese, when the planning board issues a conditional use permit, that is not appealable to the zoning board.
Okay.
If the planning board were to rule similarly to the code enforcement officer and saying, yes, this, or no, that, they are acting as an administrative official, and those administrative decisions can be appealed.
Okay, so
to the
this
zoning
basically,
board.
it has to be this way.
This is how an aggrieved person, aggrieved by the planning board's conditional use permit would appeal.
As is defined by the state.
Correct.
Right. Anyone else want to speak? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. And planning board members, any thoughts on this issue?
Defer comments, Madam Chairwoman.
You would?
I will defer comments.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we amend inclusionary zoning the way that we have outlined here. I think the sewer issue could be addressed in a different way, and will be. If it's really a problem, there will be another moratorium. You know, we can't solve all of the town's problems here. So I move that we approve this section.
The inclusionary
Inclusion
zone.
175-28, amend inclusionary zoning.
Okay, go ahead, Tavis.
Does that include by reference the changes to 173?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, somebody want to second that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to go ahead with 175-28, the inclusionary zoning. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And one abstention. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, the last item, and I lost all of my papers here, lots without frontage. 175-55-1 to amend language for permission to build on lots with no frontage as accepted under New Hampshire RSA 674:41, 11-A. Okay, this was adopted for some clarification in 2014. And there additional changes are now being made to clarify some of the provision and allow review by the planning board rather than ZBA. Right now, it goes to the planning board, then ZBA. These changes now would allow a conditional zoning permit to be granted by the planning board. And this has been reviewed by our attorney, Tavis.
That's really the only change. It's changing the permitting process from a special exception to a special exception with review and comment by the planning board to a conditional use permit. The only other change really is removing the requirement for the planning board to comment, because that's part of the process.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Go ahead, Roger.
While I'm on a roll here,
Roger, could you pull the microphone down?
oh, sure. Can you hear me better?
Thank you.
I'm probably running out of voice, too. I understand the changes are being made to this. The one question I have is the second paragraph under A, which reads, further, this section intends to permit development of existing lots of record as an innovative land use tool to encourage both infill development and support access management to existing lots in accordance with. And I'm not sure what that does or why it's there, or are we granting some kind of benefit to lots with no frontage that other lots don't have?
No.
What's the purpose of this then? Or what does it do?
Legal recommendation is to invoke a conditional use permit process. It has to be furthered as an innovative land use tool. And the connection between 67421 innovative land use tool was decided by the board to encourage both infill development and support access management.
I mean, you're looking at a lot with no frontage, and you're agreeing that they can go get a building permit. You know, you've got rid of some of the lot size requirements, and you've made it easier. But are we going to put multifamily dwellings in here? We're going to put workforce housing on a lot with no frontage? I mean, I don't understand the purpose.
Functionally speaking, I am not aware of a lot without frontage that would be large enough to consider a multifamily project. I'm not aware of a lot without frontage in Wolfeboro that would support an inclusionary project. So yes, semantically, the language would allow either of those projects on a lot with no frontage, but this is simply for issuing a building permit. Because as you're probably well aware, 67441 precludes issuance of a building permit for the erection of a structure on a lot not on a Class 5 road or subparagraphs A through J. So when I discussed this with members, well, with the whole planning board, the intent was not to trigger a special exception necessarily. It was to provide a mechanism for review to make sure that said lots had a deeded right-of-way for access. Because the intent was never to preclude development on those lots entirely. I think Kathy did the hand count. I think there might be 200 in town. The average lot size on those is less than half an acre. So less than half an acre, whether you use 15%, 6 units per acre, or what have you, it's really, it's making sure that the applicants agree to the acknowledgement regarding issue of a building permit on a private way, the acknowledgement regarding ineligibility for subdivision, future subdivision, and all of those things. It's effectively a version of a Class 6 waiver, if you will, for an existing lot. But not all of them are on any road.
So what's the benefit of including this second paragraph under A?
It's the legal nexus to allow a conditional use permit.
Okay.
As I understand it. I'm not one of you. Okay.
Wolfeboro currently has a procedure that the Board of Selectmen have established for approving building permits on a Class 6 road. How does this change that?
Doesn't.
So why is it included here as a change? I mean,
this is lots without frontage on a road. This is a back lot down in South Wolfeboro that only has a deeded right-of-way from turn of time.
Yeah, but
not a road.
Paragraph A on page 21, the last sentence says applies to all lots with frontage or on or access to a Class 6 road.
No, what it says is 67441 applies to all lots with frontage on or access to a Class 6 road and lots that do not comply.
So what does that mean to me that I don't know what 67441 means? What's the practical effect on Class 6 road, existing lots on Class 6 roads?
An existing lot on a Class 6 road requires a Class 6 waiver through the Board of Selectmen.
Or you go to the Board of Selectmen.
That is not this.
So that doesn't change that?
Correct.
It's a reference, so you know where to look.
Okay. So it's just saying that part stays the same?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Suzanne?
You familiar with that area? You driven down that road?
Yes, from both ends.
Huh?
From both ends. I'm not sure how it's relevant, but yes.
Well, the thing of it is, you can't get through that road, so you haven't driven all the way down it.
I'll
Okay,
defer
well,
to disagree.
Please make your
The point
comments,
the
okay?
point being, it's Class 6 roads. You're opening up that area again to more expansion for an area that has 5 and 10 acre zoning. So those numbers you're using for your downtown half-acre lots don't compute with this area. And further, you're adding this incentive land use to be the innovative land use to be used up here. Just blow it wide open.
Okay, there really isn't a lot of change in this one.
Class 6 road issue is a mess. Back lots issue
I know, we're
is a
not talking
mess,
about
and this
class.
doesn't fix it.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the public, this isn't changing the backlot language other than the
Right.
permit required to build on it.
Yes.
Class 6 does not apply to this ordinance.
Right. That's still within the selectmen's jurisdiction.
I am still concerned about backlots that aren't on Class 6 road, that are landlocked and don't have deeded rights of way.
Then they can't apply.
Huh?
Then they can't apply.
They can't apply.
Yeah.
So something that exists only as a wood lot that has no other deeded right stays.
If there's not a deeded right-of-way, this section does not apply to them.
Okay. And this still is respecting our master plan value that says this is one of the great assets of Wolfeboro is our undeveloped tracts of land.
This was added in 2014 under the same guise but a different permit, so
Okay.
I would say yes.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing on this item. Planning board members, how do you want to proceed with 175-55-1?
Move to approve as adopted, as amended.
I second that, especially because it clarifies a process that needed clarification.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you very much for coming, and for those of you who stuck it out.
Particularly on the multifamily proposal, when you anticipate that copies of those would be available to interested members of the public?
The copies for the
They're
hearing
going to be discussed on the 20th.
On the 20th.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I was just
My
clarifying.
goal will be the end of the week, depending on when we get done. It could be tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, next item on the agenda, sorry, John. Definition of accessory building or structure. Set the public hearing for 12:20.
We were done.
Sounds good to me.
So the board previously talked about this. I put a brief memo together for you. The suggestion is add to the definition of accessory building or structure the final sentence, detached accessory dwelling units are not accessory buildings or structures. I anticipate this being somewhat problematic, and I'll tell you why. If an accessory dwelling unit is not an accessory structure, what is it? Because you either have primary or accessory, and if you're saying that an accessory dwelling unit is not accessory, then it must be therefore primary. Another way to address this same scenario is to remove the 1/2 bath on the ground floor sentence from accessory building or structure. Because functionally you are allowing an accessory structure to have a full bath, probably and most
Okay,
likely.
but we're not talking about the bathrooms right now. The only thing
No,
we're talking
what I'm saying is it may be confusing to the public to say that a detached accessory dwelling unit is not an accessory building or structure. All you need to say is that an accessory building or structure is a structure containing no habitable space and you only get 2 per 80,000 square feet. The problem comes in because Previously, the town didn't allow bathrooms in accessory structures. If you simply remove that, it's very clear that an accessory building or structure is just that, an accessory building or structure. And an accessory dwelling unit is an accessory building with habitable space.
What are you proposing, Tavis? Are you proposing the wording that's underlined here?
That's what the board has asked to do. What I'm preparing you for is that it could add some confusion by saying that an accessory dwelling unit or a detached accessory dwelling unit is not an accessory structure. By definition, it is accessory and incidental.
A detached accessory dwelling unit, that's an ADU.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, that's, all that was a clarification. It wasn't meant to talk about bathrooms or whatever. It was just meant to add that to the definition.
The problem I think Tavis is trying to get across is when somebody has a bathroom in a structure and it's not the primary structure, it's now an ADU or something else. We either need to remove the bathroom totally out of it and call it good, so that people aren't building the bathroom.
What I put here is what the board asked for as a clarification. It is not my recommendation. This is what the board asked for.
Okay, well.
Yeah, but now you're suggesting that there's a wrinkle that's going to make us have to go back and rethink.
Based on tonight's discussion on multiple articles, the public wants it very clear and concise.
If I may, then I would recommend to the board that we do not bring this to the public hearing on the 20th.
Right.
We go back to the drawing board and make sure that we do have our ducks in a row before we do bring this to the public hearing.
Okay.
Whether that's this year or next is the way it shapes out.
Probably next year.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'll second that. That all right with everybody? Okay, so motion has been made and seconded to not proceed with this to be heard next week on the 20 on December 20th. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Very good. Okay, and then we have minutes from November 1st.
Don't leave. I'll catch up with it.
I just had a couple on page 2. One, it said Kay Barnett opened the public hearing, and there was a little thing here, it's supposed to say 7:25 p.m. And then, Mike, down about 2/3 of the way down, it says H. Hodder. But so I just crossed that off.
Henry.
Gotcha.
Henry.
Yeah.
Be Henry.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, he's Henry.
Call me anything you want right now.
Oh, okay.
Don't open that door publicly.
Oh, all right. Okay, I didn't realize.
Change the H to M. Thank you,
Got it.
Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, anybody else have anything?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay, second.
Moved by Mike.
We can put them back in. I
That's
didn't
cool.
realize that.
No, that's cool. I have a number of names,
okay.
none of them is Henry. But
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And
Okay.
abstain.
I'm going to abstain as well. I haven't read the minutes.
And I
You
wasn't
would?
here. I wasn't
I have
here.
not had an opportunity to review the minutes, so I'll abstain.
Oh, okay, so how many people abstained?
2.
Two. Okay, all right. Okay, very good.
Move to adjourn?
Okay, second. All right.
Good, thank God.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye, aye, aye.